the spot.
If I look over and wince, then you know I need you.
I shall be wincing.
Good evening and welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting for July 9th, 2019. For the first session, we are going to go into an executive session and hopefully come out of it in 15, 20 minutes and try to stay on time. So I would like to have a motion to go into executive session, and I'll read the rest of the agenda after that.
I move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel or contract negotiations with non-union personnel, Director of Finance and Budget, Town Accountant.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call. Chase?
Aye.
Thank you.
Cindy?
Aye.
Chuck?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Joe? Aye. Thank you, we'll be back in about 15, 20 minutes.
That's okay. I told Diana to do that. She came.
So Cheryl's coming in she's coming in and we actually go through her appointment, is that right?
Yeah. There's coming, is it 8:30? 8:30, yeah. So,
You don't have to wait for Chuck.
yeah.
Welcome back to the Board of Selectmen's meeting for July 15th, 2019. Let me read through the agenda for the night. We just got through executive session a little bit longer than we wanted to. It was supposed to be 6:30. We will have the organization pledge of allegiance and read mail, followed by department board updates, recreational mower replacement requests by the Public Works, then fiscal year 2019 end-of-year transfers of judgments by interim finance director, followed by construction manager risk, Mass General Law, Chapter 149 is proposed delivery method for library construction by the Permanent Municipal Building Committee. Number 5, it will be public input and member updates. 6, which is supposed to be at 7:20, joint meeting with the marijuana working group, recommendations, application review, form from marijuana working group, and the next steps that we would possibly take. Followed by appointments for the Agricultural Commission, the Clean Lakes Committee, and the Disability Commission. Goal submissions is number 8. Number 9 will be the administration oversight of Littleton Sewer Department and the memorandum of agreement with Littleton White and Water Commissioners, followed by facilities manager and building commissioner position openings. Then Director of Finance and Budget Accountant, appointment of Ms. Cheryl Herrick Stella. And at the end, 12 town administrator, assistant town administrator, auditing firm updates, some internship update, assistant town administrator, acceptance of position with the town of Wenham, and then followed by minutes. Right now, Mr. Clerk, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Nina, the mail?
Thank you. It wasn't included in the board's packet, but there were 2 items of correspondence that came in today to the board. One was from Xfinity regarding their severance of a relationship with TiVo, and the other one was from FEMA regarding upcoming meetings relating to their flood map and insurance program.
That's the extent of it?
There was also another document in front of the board members regarding a July 25th form-based code meeting by the planning board as well.
That's on the 25th, right?
Yes.
Okay. In room 103. Okay. That's okay with the board. We'll move on to item number 3. Chris, we want to talk about the recreation replacement mower requests and so forth?
So this is kind of standard practice for us after a town meeting. We've passed July 1st, so we're ready to replace our mower. It's a 2001 Kubota. We're replacing with a new John Deere. So we've tested out a few different brands, and these are the ones that the guys like the best. So fits our budget. I think it'll work real well. And actually, do you have both on the same motion?
Yes, I do.
All right, and then the other one is to replace the wide area mower. That's his, same thing, we checked a couple different kinds, and the Toro one they like the best, so.
And the wide areas, that's just for the big ball fields
Yeah,
and things
yeah,
like that.
that's the one we're gonna, just basically does all the sports fields.
And both pieces of equipment, about 20 years old? the ones you-
Yeah, one's a 2001, and the other one's the wide area is a 97, so that one's 22 years old. We've reached our useful, end of our useful
You
days.
got your money's worth.
Seems we probably reached that about a decade ago.
Well, we did, but that's okay.
What do you do with the old ones?
Trade them in.
Just trade them.
Yeah, so we're actually, I can't remember exactly how it works, but the wide area mower we're trading in towards the John Deere because they're giving us a bigger trade-in than Toro was going to, so. And then we're actually gonna keep the 01 as a backup because we just blew the rear end in another one today, so actually works out, we're gonna have a spare, so.
Smart.
Because they were only gonna give us $500 for a trade-in anyway, so. It just makes more sense to keep it as a spare.
Sure. Cannibalize it. if nothing
Yeah.
else.
Any other questions from the board?
Nope.
Nope. Look for a motion?
Let me find it here. Oh,
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Article 8 of the Town, May 6, 2019 Annual Town Meeting to approve award of a contract in the amount of $21,575.58 to Padula Brothers Incorporated in Lancaster, Mass. for the purchase of a John Deere zero-turn mower, and approve award of a contract in the amount of $64,698.54 to TPC Turf Products of Enfield, Connecticut for the purchase of a Toro. We're not doing the Toro, we're doing the John Deere.
The John Deere is for the zero-turn, the one above it.
But the Toro's being done by Padula as well?
No,
TPC, I'm
TPC,
sorry, I'll just
correct.
read the words in front of me, okay. For the purchase of a Toro 4000D wide area mower, both under Massachusetts State Contract FAC 88.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Right.
Thank you.
When do you get the new toys?
We have to order, I believe the John Deere they might actually have, so hopefully in a week. The Toro they have to order, so it'll probably be a month or so.
So test cut, 609, Newtown Road, just a little test cut, just kidding.
Thank you.
They've always done it in the past.
Unless you're gonna lease the field to the soccer team?
Okay. Fiscal year 2019. Mr. Venuti?
Good evening. We have the year-end adjustments and transfers for year-end FY19. I met with the Finance Committee on Tuesday of last week. They've already approved all these transfers, so now it's up to the Selectmen to also approve them. As you see, as we go through this, some other boards and committees also had to weigh in on some of these transfers, and all those meetings have already been held, and all the committees have already voted for those transfers. I'll start off on year-end budget transfers. The way I laid out this chart, the budget where the money is coming from is listed first as the budget decrease, and where that money goes to is listed right after it as the budget increase. The first one, pretty straightforward, to pay for the interim town accountant. That's an expense to the town and not salary, so we had extra money in the salary line item that we're now covering down to the expense line item to pay for the consultants that we've used. We anticipate, so for FY20, we're using that same consultant, the interim town accountant, for the month of July, and probably on and off during the month of August as we transition to our new finance director and town accountant. So by the 1st of September, that expense should be gone from the town. Okay.
And you expect that from now forward, it'll be close enough to balancing out between salary savings and
Yes, it should be enough.
consultant expenses.
Yes. The other little piece of that in clerk wages for $1,100, if you remember when we transitioned from The part-time person that was shared between the clerk and the collector, it was presented when we split that position into two positions as a budget neutral transition. It still is a budget neutral transition, only they're on different line items that were voted at town meeting, so we need to fund $1,100 down to the town clerk's wage line, because that was the one that was short, so we're actually taking it from extra money that's in the tax collector's line and bringing it down to the town clerk. $3,164 coming from elections and registrations, going down to clerk expenses. One of the things that we've looked at in the past couple of months is ways FY19 can impact FY20, and did we budget appropriately in FY20? And one of the things that we saw is departments were paying bills out of other line items with probably as a matter of convenience. And that happened in a lot of cases in these transfers. There was money in this budget, I control this budget, let's pay for it. That's not how you build a constructive budget. You'll never really get what the true expenses of that department are. So even though the money is still in the operating budget, it's just not in the right spot in the operating budget. So we've gone through and identified as much of those things as we possibly can, move those funds, and in some cases it did cause a deficit in one of the accounts. And we're taking actions to transfer the funds. We now have a better idea of what the clerk's expenses really should be, and a better idea of what the elections should be.
A question on that one, it just caught my eye, Steve. Thinking back just to reality, that this was a year where we had the absentee voting took place down here, which I remember the clerk saying was an additional expense. It was a good convenience for elderly voters, others that wanted to vote absentee in advance, and we get a lot more of that. And then this was a year we also had an unexpected special town meeting, and yet or at least your transfers are suggesting that
The problem wasn't in the elections line, it was in the clerk's line. A lot of the
so those costs were
expenses-
getting covered. This is point in case, right, where their actuals for elections were really higher over the past year, but because they've been historically covering it from other funds available to them?
Other way
Or
around.
other way around? Yep.
The clerk's expenses were under budgeted.
Okay.
And some of those expenses were being paid out of the elections budget. And you never really get a good number for what the
Okay.
clerk's expenses are. So in the fall town meeting, we'll be probably bringing some of these items forward to adjust the budget, make those transfers, let town meeting authorize those transfers instead of waiting till the end of the year like we're doing now.
And I realize that the board understands this, but just for those at home, and in the audience, it's all from the same allocation, and it's all budgeted, but what your point is, Steve, is when we pull reports, you won't be able to generate as comprehensive backup to what we spent on X and what we spent on Y, because you'd have to go to a different account, pull information from
Exactly.
there and compile it, so it won't be as seamless.
Right.
But ultimately, these were all allocated expenses.
Yes, town meeting approved the operating expenses for both those line items. It's just that when we paid the bills, they were probably paid out of the wrong accounts. We're trying to fix that, produce a better budget process for the next time we go through this.
So anticipated expenditures will come from actual line items that cover that cost.
Yes. That's clerk expenses. The next couple of lines, the unemployment expense and the general insurance, they're funding the next 5 or 6 items. Unemployment expense, we always budget at the $100,000. We have no control over the school departments, employees, and they're the biggest employer in the town. Sometimes, depending on what they do at year end, we may get impacted with higher unemployment charges. We had a good experience this past year, so we have extra money in that line item that we can cover some of the deficits and some other things. The general insurance is the same type of thing during the year. If we have good experience with our property and casualty carrier through Maya, they will give us quarterly credits. So if we do safety programs, if we have good experience and not submit claims for property and casualty, we'll get a credit in there. This year, we were able to accumulate the credits because there wasn't very many endorsement changes that we had to flow through to the insurance, new vehicles, things like that. So we're able to actually keep the credits and not have to spend them with those extra endorsements. So we're able to transfer $50,000 out of that line item to cover the next few items also. Planning wages, appeals board wages, information system wages, small changes, mostly due to night meetings, probably just a rounding area on the IT salaries when the estimate was done. The information system expenses on the top of the next page, we're reserving $3,000 there as an encumbrance. Nancy is looking at one bill that's come in, and she's kind of going back to the vendor to make sure that it's a true expense and not something that should be pushed to the next year. So we're reserving that money. Health wages, again, is the same thing, night meetings, people taking minutes, not budgeting appropriately for those little extra hours. Again, not much money, $980 there. Fuel costs of $5,200. It was either the last week of the fiscal year or the week prior to, we put in a final order for fuel. They couldn't wait, so we went from a $5,000 surplus in the line item to a $5,000 deficit. Town meeting expenses and reports. This is the extra town meeting that we had during the year. There was also the extra mailing that we did for that meeting. The closed captioning was a cost for that. Probably, and I've heard the numbers that were bandied about what the town meeting cost us, and I assume that that included people's time and wages and things like that, just true expenses that would hit that. It's probably somewhere between $6,000 and $8,000 that town meeting cost us. In FY20, the budget was increased from $10,000 to $14,000, which is really, enough to cover the two meetings with the little extra printing costs from a bigger booklet and things like that happen. More time with the closed captioning because it's a longer meeting than we had on that special. So $14,000 is probably an appropriate thing for 2 town meetings. Public building expense, $72,400 of that line item. What's included here is maintenance for all our buildings, just regular everyday supplies, little fixes that happen during the year. Another big piece of this is central communications. It's all the phone lines in the town. One of the things that Nancy and I, and we need to sit down and discuss this with Nina, is reimbursements for phones that we have throughout the town. Some people we give town phones to, some people we pay part of their plan charges, some people we give a flat amount to, some things are controlled by union contracts that we have. I think we need to standardize those things throughout the town. This is the way we handle it, this is how we're gonna reimburse. That way we know what the costs are gonna be, and they're not flipping up and down as people's plans change. This is what you're gonna get. So we need to sit down with Nina and go through those things. And Nancy and I have been talking about that for a few months now. The budget for public building expenses is increasing in FY20 to $515,000. That should be enough to cover things. Nancy's also gone through the communications lines within the past month or so, and with the transition that we had from the IT area leaving the light department and coming straight to the town, there was a lot of phone lines there that we found that we really didn't need, that were not of use anymore because of the connection that was stopped between us. She's cut those lines where they've fallen off our bill for the month of May, May and June. at considerable savings. It's a couple of $1,000s a month that we're seeing just by stopping those things. We've also identified some line items, some lines, communication lines that should be billed to the water department, some lines for their, I know Corey's back there somewhere. That should be going to the water department, and I'll be dealing with Erica and those, and transitioning those costs over to the water department. Fire EMS wages, we're taking $30,500 from that line item and putting it to police dispatch expenses. The fire department in FY19 stopped some training that they had in one of their line items. It's not budgeted in FY20, a savings of $37,000 in FY20 for that line item. It wasn't used in 19, we're using that to push it to the police department. Police department, if you remember, with dispatch, police and dispatch voted the same line item at town meeting. We had to incur extra expenses with dispatch when we went to the ALS, additional staffing, additional training over there. It wasn't budgeted properly when that time came to budget for 19 for the staffing, creating a deficit on that line item that the police department couldn't cover internally. So we're switching some of those funds from the fire department over to there. FY20, just as a heads up, the police chief, and I've met with him on several occasions. He's reviewing his budget that was submitted for 20. I have a feeling that the same type of mistake was done in 20, but he's gonna go through the numbers, come up with what he thinks should be the budget that's submitted. And so we may see a transfer at special town meeting in the fall to cover what could be a potential deficit in the police department. But we'll have to cover that internally because we generally don't increase budgets in the fall town. Highway expenses, $12,000 has to be transferred down to the wastewater stormwater line item. There were some bills that came in over for the smart sewer project over what was appropriated. So we're able to cover that through the highway budget and transfer it into the existing wastewater line item. We have an authorization for a $2.2 million borrowing. We didn't do that at the end of the fiscal year. There was no reason to borrow to cover $12,000. It was a late bill that came in anyways, so we're covering internally. So for that section, are there any questions on the transfers? I know I went through them quickly.
What was the date of that last bill, just for my edification?
It came up to the,
This would be a Weston and Sampson bill, right?
yes, I think it came up to be paid in the final week, up to Diane to pay. I think it was dated February or April, it was somewhere in that time frame. So it hung around for a little while somewhere.
Mr. Chairman, I think perhaps Chris might
I'm
have.
sorry, Chris?
It was an April bill, and it was in the transition when Katie was still out, so it kind of got missed.
Okay,
And then-
so these weren't late charges from Weston?
No, they're not late charges, it was just no, we actually paid the following 3 invoices to them, they were kind of, it was a.
And Chris did have an encumbrance in there on that line item.
All right, so you knew it was out there anyway?
He knew
Yeah.
something
I
was
remember
out
hearing
there.
there was a
The estimate was just.
$4,000 bill we were waiting on somewhere, or is that, that was part of this at least, right?
Oh, say that again, I'm
I
sorry.
thought there was like a $4,000 bill we knew was out there somewhere.
It might have been part of this, we're up to snuff now.
Okay.
We're paid up, so to speak.
And then going forward, next fiscal year, we'll have the design authorization to begin to work.
Correct.
We haven't even touched the 2.2 yet.
We haven't had authorization to spend the 2.2 yet.
Do you want to do the votes as we go along, or you have
I
one?
proposed it as one large vote. However the board wishes to do it, we could certainly vote them individually. Perhaps keep going, and then at
Keep
the end, we
going.
can make a decision.
Okay. Revolving fund limits. So, this is something that I learned myself. Is every year we vote Article 3, which lists all the revolving funds that the town has under this Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 55E and a half. And under that Mass General Law, you have to designate how much money you intend to spend out of that revolving fund during the year. That number that's presented to town meeting in May of 18 for the 19's budget was not updated as it should have been. Good example is in Article 4, the very next article, for this very first line item that's on the list here for the building inspector out of his permit fees. We have a transfer coming in from the revolving fund for $125,000, yet Article 3, that had just been voted by town meeting, only authorized a $100,000 transfer. So it's just a disconnect that happened. We were doing something in Article 4, it wasn't followed through all the way into Article 3. These things correct that situation. Again, some of these things will have to go back to town meeting in the fall to fix what was actually voted in the May 19 meeting, because the same types of things happened on some of these funds. Okay? Building inspector, I just explained that. It was voted for $100,000, Article 4. The next article had $125,000 authorization. In addition to that, some of the building inspectors' expenses are paid out of that revolving fund, so that added a little additional cost. So we're looking for a revised expenditure limit of $135,000 for that one. Sealer of weights and measures, there was a $3,000 authorization from town meeting. The actual bill for the sealer is currently $7,000. 2 bills were paid. They bill on the very last week of the fiscal year for the entire fiscal year preceding. The bill for 18 came in late, so it was doubled up in 19. So even though it was for the previous fiscal year, we need to include that in the authorization for 19. So we're increasing that to $14,000, looking for a vote for that. In FY 20, the limit was voted in Article 3 for $8,000, which should be enough to cover the existing charges to the sealer and weights and measures. Spectacle Pond Cell Tower Fund, Corey's here to talk about this. If you have any questions with the Clean Lakes Committee, there was an article that the Clean Lakes Committee had proposed back in May of 16. That didn't seem to make its way onto the warrant. The project was postponed for a couple of years because they were doing some other things. Corey went to do that project this past year and started the project thinking that the funds were there. Unfortunately, there was nothing to pay those against, so we paid as much as we could out of the Clean Lakes budget. The rest has to come out of the Spectacle Pond Cell Tower funds, which is dedicated to the Clean Lakes Fund. So it's where the original dollars would have come from anyways. If you have any questions, Corey, did I explain it okay?
Yeah, that was basic. Do we need any more information, or like?
There's also a memo from the Clean Lakes Committee in the packet that explains it a little more detail.
So we're just not gonna be making that, rather than taking a round trip, it's going straight out of the spec pond fund. Is that right?
Right.
He will be looking for, and correct me if I'm wrong, Corey, he'll be looking for the remaining dollars for the project at the fall town meeting as authorization. Again, the funds will be coming from the Spec Pond Cell Tower Fund, but let's get a capital item out there that is supposed to be there to pay for this.
Right. Right, so this would clean up FY19. For FY20, we'll have fall town meeting article to authorize the remaining expenses necessary to that project.
Okay? Cemetery revolving fund is an authorization in Article 3 for $10,000. Part of what the funds that the cemetery department collects are for during the year for sale of lots and things like that, are for perpetual care. The cemetery commissioners for the past couple of years have transferred some of those funds into the trust funds for perpetual care moving forward. They've transferred $20,000 this year. The authorization to spend out of the revolving fund was only $10,000. So we're looking to increase that to $35,000 to cover some other transfers that also needed to happen from town meeting that weren't handled, again, followed through the way it should have been. Cemetery Commission has already been briefed on it. They know exactly what it is. They've already voted the transfer from the revolving fund to the trust funds. Trust funds have already been replenished with that $20,000 in perpetual care. So we're just looking to circle the wagons and increase this line item. Permitting software, up in the building inspector's department, they have a new version of the software that they implemented for permitting. Cost $38,000, paid for out of their receipts that they take in this fund. However, the fund was only authorized for a $15,000 expenditure. Moving forward, in FY '20, for example, that revolving fund was authorized at $20,000 in Article 3. There's a quarterly software support of $4,000, I think, for that software moving forward, so there's plenty in the authorization. To cover that, we're just short of an authorization coming out of those revolving funds for the software purchase. So those are the revolving fund changes. Next thing is the enterprise fund with Park and Rec. This one has a few moving parts. I've talked with Alicia extensively through this. Anthony and I talked with the chairman of the Park and Rec Commissioners about this. So both the commission and the department are well aware of what's going on with their enterprise fund here. What happened is the fund, probably in May, we noticed that their expense levels were higher than what they normally should be at that point in the year. At that time, I sat down with Alicia, explained to her what was going on, that they needed to curb their spending because they were going to overspend. She put the brakes on as best as she could, but a lot of the problems was the salary line. What happened, from what I could find out in trying to reconstruct things, is in FY '19, the town contributed $193,000 from the general fund to support their salaries. Portions of their salaries, the full-time staff, and the benefits associated with those salary numbers. In FY '20, that was increased to $230,000. If you look at the first column of the enterprise fund, that's the budget that was appropriated at town meeting. You can see the money coming in at the top, the $193,300 transferred in from the general fund. What it seems to me, when they constructed the wage line, the expenses, the $392,000 that's listed there, it didn't include the $193,000. So it was everybody but the full-time staff that was listed there. So of course they're going to be short. So we had to take steps to bring this enterprise fund into balance as best we could. As I mentioned, Alicia stopped her spending. What we wound up having to do, and the Park and Rec Commission voted this last week, the $50,000 reserve fund, which was initially meant to spend on capital. They reallocated that. The capital wasn't spent on capital. They reallocated that $50,000 to cover the salaries, partially cover the salary shortfall. So that's $50,000 of the shortfall. That brought the shortfall that they had to $105,000. There's not enough, there's not a like budget in the town to cover Park and Rec salaries. That line item doesn't exist. So what we had to do was identify some expenses that we have in common with the Park and Rec department and transfer those expenses to the general fund, and that is employee benefits. So the enterprise fund supports health insurance, life insurance, things of that nature, retirement contributions. for the Park and Rec employees. We identified $58,000 of those expenses, transferred those expenses to the general fund, which created a surplus in the expense line item for $105,000. And we're looking for the board to support a transfer from expenses up to salaries to cover the salary line. Like I said, Alicia and the commissioners are well aware that the town is supporting almost $58,000 worth of expenses. They'll be putting together their a revised FY '20 budget for fall town meeting, because the exact same thing has happened in FY '20. Again, the commissioners are well aware of this. They have 3 ways to solve this issue. They can increase their fees, they can reduce their expenses, or through a combination of things, we can hit the reserves that they have. In FY '18, they had reserves that the state certified of $230,000. We hit them in '19 for $50,000 that they've used, so that brings them down to the 180. We'll definitely be eating into those reserves to some level, depending on what she can do with the fees and the expense levels as she reviews the budget. But they're well aware that their reserves will be hit, because the town will get their $58,000 back. The general fund will be reimbursed. Okay. Couple other things, informational, Board of Water Commissioners, they also have a reserve fund that they use. They budgeted $200,000 this year. They only spent $72,000. The commissioners voted that last week to allocate the $72,000 of the reserves that they're using to cover some excess salaries that they had, and the rest of those reserve dollars will go back to their free cash levels. They're building that free cash level at a pretty nice rate right now to build, enough surplus in there to cover any infrastructure changes that they're gonna have as the system gets older, which is very prudent on their part to do. Article closeouts, FY '19, I went through the articles with each department head, and the building, Steve.
PMBC?
PMBC, thank you.
You're welcome.
Went through all the articles that are outstanding with them and the departments. We identified $653,000 worth of closeouts of older articles and projects that have been completed. The largest of those, the fire station and alumni field, $184,000 and $181,000 respectively. These monies will close out, go to free cash, and be available when we recertify free cash come the spring. Also, snow and ice, the deficit was $204,000 this year, and in the budget for FY '20, we allocate $450,000, so we have $245,000 available for capital spending come fall town meeting. Okay? And that is all.
Any questions on the board? Seeing none.
I don't have any.
Just throw a question out there relative to, if we're gonna be having to raise fees in order to make up some of the PRC shortfall, if you will, or
It has to be on the table as a possibility. I would doubt that that's the tack that Alicia's gonna be taking. It's more of expense cutting and eating into the reserves, is probably what's gonna happen.
there are enough reserves there that
Yes,
just don't leave them light.
yes.
Still, 180 in reserves?
There'd be 180 to use, yes. And they have to
Like a 58.
make up 58. and cut expenses.
Historically, when did we build up those reserves? I mean, and what efforts were required, essentially, how many years' worth of work are we eating into to build up a couple $100,000 of reserves to make up
This
this
is
shortfall?
the third or fourth year of the enterprise fund for Park and Rec.
Okay.
There were a revolving fund previous to that.
Sure.
So it's once they got established as an enterprise fund,
Okay.
that they're able to capture their own funds.
So we're eating back into a year or so's worth of
Yes,
reserve generation.
yes.
And
Theoretically, should be able to replenish it in a similar fashion.
I have to see what Alicia comes up for with the budget for FY '20. We need to build something that's sustainable.
Right.
Right, I mean, we get hit twice there, right? We're eating into it and not generating the reserves this year.
Right.
It's a double whammy.
Anything else?
I'll move that the Board of Selectmen vote to amend fiscal year 19 operating budget per MGL Chapter 44, Section 33B by transferring $175,649 from to various budget line items per MGL Chapter 44, Section 55E and a half to amend Article 3 of the May 7, 2018 annual town meeting by increasing the spending limits of the revolving funds and to approve the transfer of the $105,214 from fiscal year 19 budgeted expenses to fiscal year 19 budgeted salaries in the Parks and Recreation Enterprise Fund, all is detailed in a July 9, 2019 memorandum from the interim finance director, treasurer Steve Venuti.
Motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion?
No?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Item 4, proposed library construction delivery method. PMBC. Mr. Moore? Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The request from PMBC tonight will be to use the CM at risk delivery method for the library. That is a process by which you bring the contractor in during the design phase. They act as a partner as opposed to an adversary. It does cost a little bit more in the upfront, maybe about 2%. But we typically save that in the back end with fewer change orders. When I was working for a contractor years ago, we would start our change order log as we went through the bid documents. And then we would figure out how much we could cut from the bid to be competitive, and then figure out that we were gonna recoup at least that, with change orders. That's what we're trying to avoid here. So, May town meeting appropriated 1.2 million, 1.8 million, 1.5 million for the design phase of the library. Now, what we had done was we had, in that 1.5, that included costs for the OPM.
Yes.
This is Vertex, Kevin Heffernan,
Hello, everyone.
and the designer, and also $185,000 for the CM at risk. What we failed to do was to include any mention of the CM at risk in the Maytown warrant, or the warrant for Maytown meeting, or the special town meeting. So town council has advised us that we have to come and get permission from the Board of Selectmen so that we can submit our application to the Office of the Inspector General. The application to use a CM at risk has to be approved by the OIG, and town council has to sign that application. So in order for them to sign that application, we need to get your approval.
So in order for the CMR to go to the OIG, you need the BOS to say, okay.
You got
Why,
it.
yes.
Now,
We're
Kevin,
practicing that,
Kevin recently used the CM at risk on school over at his,
Yes, we're currently using the CM at risk plan in Bill Ricker for the Bill Ricker High School. The reasons why we went with that, there were several reasons. Number one, it met the criteria of being over $5 million. Secondly, the size of the project, but also the complexity of the project. The building being so close to the existing high school, when you bring the designer on, and you also bring in the CM at risk, they work side by side to make sure they eliminate the potential for any accidents or we like to use lay-down areas in construction, just so the contractor has someplace to pull from. And where the location of the library is proposed to go, that would be a very difficult process. So you bring in the CM at risk, he takes full responsibility for laying out the job. He gives you the maximum cost it would be for the project, but he also works with all the other town offices here to facilitate a plan that would not interfere with the operations day-to-day of the existing town hall. So they did the same exact thing for us because our existing high school is wide open and it's only 3 to 5 feet away from the brand-new high school. So in using that delivery method, we were able to ensure that we properly put the fences out, proper notification for everybody, and that all the subcontractors knew the rules and requirements set forth not only by the town, but also the GC and the designer, because those two are working side by side with the OPM to get the project done for everybody. So the method for us was well worth it. And looking at this project, because of the complexity of the rear parking lot and how often this building is used, you would need, we felt it necessary to potentially bring somebody in who could also share in how we would resolve any issues that could potentially come up and make the job as seamless as it could possibly be without incident. And that's what we're looking for. But the real reason for a CM at risk also is the jobs usually have a tendency to be done quicker. So you have less time in the backside. You're looking at the job because they're already buying out all the product now. They would be if we went down this method. And the designer, who's Johnson Roberts currently, we would use them and they would help with the design of the CM at risk so they knew exactly what product to buy. It's also an interview process, so we're looking at the CM and not just picking any willy-nilly. We're gonna look at them, we're gonna interview them, and we just go from there. So it's a good, I guess, checks and balances for the project to make sure we don't have any issues coming up.
it gives us much more control over the process. Unlike Alumni Field that Anthony lived day to day, you don't have that adversarial relationship.
How many other projects have used this type of thing?
All school projects in the state are required to use CM at risk.
Is this new?
No,
This has been going on for several years.
no.
I mean, this is how I handle my bigger projects. I'd rather get the contractor on board on day one and have him write the technical specifications with me, rather than write them and then hand them to him and like you said, go through and have him just, oh, I see a $50,000 change order, oh, I forgot that,
Right.
and it ends up being a much tighter design, so that when it's implemented, there just aren't surprises.
And the contractor tends to understand the lead time on a lot of these things a little bit better than the designer, and also which items are escalating quicker in cost. So, sometimes it's a good check on the architect to get some current pricing. And the CM at risk will do an independent cost estimate also.
Right.
And I do believe Mark has something to say also.
Yes, so last Thursday, we formally were awarded the grant from MBLC, so they gave us the 5.8 million.
Congratulations.
So the clock is, we're now ticking on the clock. We have 6 months to get the rest of the funding.
So with respect to paying the CM at risk, how does the compensation structure work? Are they making all their money on the back end, or are we paying them time and materials or
Well,
something on the
Typically, a
front end?
CM at risk discounts their pre-construction work,
Okay,
and then they make it up in the
and
back.
then they make it
Yeah.
up on the back end. Okay, but we are going to be incurring some cost for them.
Yes, absolutely.
Between now and
Yep,
the first shovel in the ground.
absolutely, yep.
What's the process that we're gonna go through, once we get in bed with with the construction manager, you know, we're going all the way through. What's the process that we're gonna use to choose that contractor? You know, I mean, normally in a
It'll be
competitive
an-
bid
it'll-
scenario, it's easy.
It'll be an RFP and an interview process.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there'll still be an RFP, but now for the totality of.
Right, and
Yep.
then we as a team, as a committee, we will decide on who we pick. The owner has the authority to choose who he wants.
Yeah, we went through this with the library when they first did their initial design and their initial OPM selection. So,
And is there an opportunity in these contracts typically to, once you get to the build phase, to jettison who we're working with, if for some reason it's really not working out? We've got the technical specifications put together, are we, once we sign that contract, they're ours all the way through? You know,
Once you sign the contract, there'll be verbiage in the contract that for whatever reason, the owner feels it's not working out.
pretty flexible language that gives us
We
the
can
opportunity.
terminate at our convenience.
Yep.
Okay.
So,
I think you said this, but I just want to confirm it. The 1.5 that was approved.
Yes.
Will be used to fund this on the upfront side.
yeah,
You said it
the
costs
1
money
point,
upfront.
yes, the 1.5 consisted of anticipated fees for the designer, the OPM, and the CM risk.
We just didn't,
We're not asking for more money, we just,
right, I'm just,
It,
again,
it just wasn't identified in the warrant. That's all.
Any questions? For motion.
I would move that the Board of Selectmen vote to enter into a contract with a construction management at-risk firm pursuant to MGL Chapter 149A, Section 4, for the proposed new library building, subject to approval by the Office of the Inspector General, which incorporates the use of a contractor during the design process as a partner in developing the project.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
thank you.
So that letter can go in,
I need to get it from
Jenny?
Jenny.
Yeah, okay, good.
All right, we're about to go into a session that's public input and member updates. I just going to ask Selectman DeCosta to go through something first before we open it up.
so typically well, pretty much every time we do public info, we just ask that if you do have anything to say, you just be recognized by the chair, you state your name and your address. Usually we'll put some sort of a disclaimer out there that if it's something that is on the agenda and is anticipated to be discussed later in the meeting, that you just save your comments for that part of the meeting. And in light of some of the incidents that have come to all of our attention, I believe everybody's attention over the past week, I just ask that folks be respectful, and if there's anything that we could say or we would say relative to the passing of a former finance director has been put out there in our public statements, so I just ask that you be respectful of that, and we don't plan on addressing any further comments or any questions relative to that matter.
And if we could, we would, but under the circumstances. I want to also point out that we've known this for a while, but we've been in the strict control not to say anything, so it's not like anyone was trying to withhold anything. It was difficult for this board, but I commend this board on their actions to let the DA and the police department conduct what they had to do. And it hasn't been easy. It's been an emotional drain on a lot of people, and people have to understand that, so.
Since the beginning of April.
Yep. All right. Any public input? Sir?
Yes, name is Joe James, 21 Laurel Road, of course, Littleton. And what I've got is a problem with the Littleton Police Department. And it's become so out of proportion that I went to the district attorney of the Middlesex County, and the witness advocate told me that try to settle this at home, under home rule, and bring it to the attention of the Board of Selectmen. What I see after talking to the Assistant Town Administrator, Anthony, that's all he identified himself as, that it's almost impossible for us to take this problem and rectify it. Now I'm still, and I really want to, deal with you, the Board of Selectmen, the Town Administrator. I will not deal with Mr. Vanasaldi. This afternoon's conversation was a little bit rough. Not much said, but not much accomplished either. So the thing is that I can say it's in the hands of the lawyers. And I told my wife that it's probably gonna cost us a few grand. And, be a case of let the games begin. Or I can either do that or even one representative of the Board of Selectmen. I can tell them my story and the person can bring it back. I will show the evidence I have. And that's it. I want to end this peacefully. The thing is that if I get pushed, I will have to push back. And when I push back, I believe that would go all the way up to the Massachusetts State Attorney General. So, I guess the case is in your court, and I want to settle this reasonably. I don't want to be using names here or anything. I think that's totally wrong. This open forum is not the place to discuss something like this. It's actually nobody's business but myself, the Board of Selectmen, and the police department. Like I said, it's your call. I want to do this peacefully. I don't want to be pushed around, which I have been, seriously. All right? Some of the things are really outrageous that have happened to me. And to be very honest, I'm a very sick man. Okay, I may not look it, but I'm a survivor of what's something called Legionnaire's disease. Okay? I guess I'm one of 6 last year that made it. I don't know if all of them made it. That's it. Mr.
Chairman?
Knox, any?
If I may.
If I may, 'cause
Chairman.
I'm at a
Yes.
loss right now.
No, so Mr. James did come in to see me, was it
A week
2 weeks
ago.
ago? A week ago? Okay, thank you. And in our discussion, we agreed that you would approach the police chief, and you did.
Yes.
I did speak with the police chief today, and as the board can certainly imagine, the police chief has been under a lot of work, and his workload has been very high. He indicated that he intends to contact Mr. James back to try to resolve this matter. So with the board's permission and with Mr. James's willingness, I'd be glad to work with you and the police chief to try to resolve this matter.
Have you contacted the police?
I did, I spoke with him today.
Well, that's good, because I tried to get him last Monday, right after I spoke to you, and again, on Wednesday, I called again for you, and I may have fouled up on the recording, you know. But if you want to discuss it, he wants to discuss it, and we can come to a meeting of the minds, I'm not too good with the English language, so you have to excuse me. But that's really it. And I've been here since, I think, 1953. Drove school bus here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And my life has been here. And it's really changing so much that I got a house up in Maine year-round, and I run up there just to get away from this. And it's really changing, and it's not changing for the better as far as I'm concerned. It's a rich man's town now.
Thank you. We'll try to resolve it that way.
I will be in touch.
Get in touch with me, and I'll back and forth, any way you want to do it. I'm not exactly that busy. Spend most of my day goofing. All right, thank
Thank you,
you.
Mr. James.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, ladies.
Sir. Thank you, members of the board, members of the town. I'm William Nadeau, 18 Robinson Road, Littleton. I know you had mentioned that for public input, if there were items on the docket for later, you would have us save those comments. These are comments regarding the proposed marijuana dispensary. Would you prefer we save those comments, or this is the appropriate time?
Let me ask, does the working group have any problem with them expressing themselves now?
It's an agenda item, so that's
Save it until after that item?
typically when it's an agenda item.
Okay, yep, that's what I wanted to ask. It's just, I saw public input, so I wasn't sure.
Appreciate it.
I'll bring it up then.
Thank you. Anything else? Seeing none, we'll go with members' input. Mr. Glavy?
All set.
Go.
Let me just, I always got to chat with him, so I mean, if he wanted to kind of say his piece now, if you're on a scheduling need to get, I think your daughter, sorry to go to the Princess Crown County, but.
I mean, I'd like to stay and hear what the board
Okay,
has to
fair
say
enough.
about it anyway, so, thank you.
The only thing I wanted to say is, this has been a difficult time for the town, and know that your town fathers, if you will, those of us that are dealing with the matters in front of us, the financial matters, are very serious about making sure that we do this right, and that we as a town can heal emotionally as well as fiscally, and we're doing everything in the best interest of the community. So I hope that we have your trust, and that you know that we are doing everything we can to protect the town.
Thank you.
I just want to let people know the Littleton Station Area Study is doing a presentation this Thursday evening at the Fire Station Community Room at 7:00 p.m. So if anyone's interested in what's going on with the Littleton Station study, there was a survey that we did online. There was 3 surveys, actually. We have the results of those surveys, and there's going to be a discussion about affordable housing in Littleton. So I really hope that people will come out and participate in that discussion this Thursday at 7:00 at the fire department. Thank you.
Jake?
Just one minor thing that I've been keeping you guys updated on it. The CONSCOM on, I guess it was last Monday, appointed a commissioner to work with Paul and I with respect to the Brown land. We haven't, now that we've essentially got the full group together, we'll start to pursue that a little bit more actively and vigorously, to evaluate that property on behalf of the board and make well, I don't know if our objective is to make a recommendation, but at least put all the information in front of everyone with the help of CONSCOM.
Can you let their counsel know that?
I'm sorry?
They're represented by an attorney. Can you let them know that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep,
Thank you.
absolutely.
And just one thing I wanted to mention, this Thursday is third Thursday at Fay Park. Love to have great attendance, and it's a great family event, so that's this Thursday from 5 to 8.
Hopefully it'll be dry by then.
Yeah, hopefully a dry Thursday. Okay, joint meeting, marijuana working group recommendations, applications, where we are, where we're gonna be going, and then turn it over to the working group. If you'd like to come up to, our 2 members from the planning board.
So the working group consists of Anna Houston, Ed Mullen, Cindy Napoli and myself, 2 members of the planning board, 2 members of the board of selectmen. We are, we prepared an application review, which identifies a number of requirements or criteria that we expect from the applicants that have presented their applications to the town. There are 23 criteria on which we are looking to grade the applicants. There's 3 grades: as highly advantageous, advantageous, and inadequate. And so the working group did in fact go through the process of grading the applicants that are before us. We're prepared to share those results with the Board of Selectmen, but prior to doing that, there's the handouts. With that. This is the tool for which we did the review process, and it's very, we put a lot of thought and effort into it, and there's a lot of discussion around it. Came to consensus on most of the points, but where there was a consensus, we'll note. If it was if it wasn't a consensus vote, if it wasn't a unanimous vote, we'll note that, just so that you know that there was some discussion, and some folks thought it might go a different way.
How many final applicants were there? So the town knows.
The determination was, so we did have 4 applications.
4 submittals.
4 submittals
Yep.
come into us. Thanks for language.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We had 4 submittals. It was determined that 2 of those did not meet our criteria to be considered applications. So there were 2 applications, or therefore 2 applicants, for a retail dispensary license in the town of Littleton. And those 2 applicants are Littleton Apothecary and Community Care Collaborative. The 2 locations are, I guess, the address on Air Road 63? 160 Air, yeah.
160.
160 Air Road and number of King Street. 531? 531 King Street. And so we went through the process of doing the evaluation process, or the evaluation review rather, and if the board will obtain the results, I can go through line by line, or I can give you kind of a summary, whatever the board.
I actually have more of a preliminary question on the 2 that were found not to be, not having met our requirements. Could you detail that a little bit?
I'm going to yield the floor to
Certainly.
the young lady to my right.
Certainly. So one of the applicants that came in, they hadn't secured a site in Littleton yet. They did approach me, and they said, they requested permission to submit their application pending on site approval. I said,
Which was a requirement of the application.
absolutely a requirement. So they submitted their application. My understanding was that the only pieces missing to that application were the site, the location. It turns out, once we received that application, there was much more information that had been omitted. So what we did is we sent a follow-up letter saying thank you for your submittal, but at this time it couldn't be considered because it hadn't submitted all the requested information, in addition to not having secured a site. So that application was not complete and couldn't be considered for obvious reasons. The other application that came in, there was some information that had been omitted. We did the same process. We sent a follow-up letter. We set forth what was missing from that application and asked them to submit a supplemental response. I want to add that we did the same exact practice with Littleton Apothecary and Community Care Collective. The applicant that I was just referring to did submit a response back to us, but a few of their answers they indicated to us they weren't required to respond to, and because it wasn't a requirement of the CCC. Not understanding that, or understanding and maybe just wanting to forego it, it might not be a requirement of the CCC, but it's a requirement of the town of Littleton as a municipality. And so the two applicants that we do have before us, Community Care Collective and Littleton Apothecary, did submit a follow-up submittal to us. They provided all the documentation that we were requesting through the RFP process. So like I said, we had a discussion with the working group, and the other applications just weren't complete, so they couldn't be considered.
And do I understand it correctly that with the two applications at 163 Air Road, they would necessarily be mutually exclusive, even if they were complete, because they can't be within 500 feet or some distance of one
They
another?
can't co-locate.
They can't co-locate,
Right.
okay, so even if there were two, it would have been
Right.
one or the other.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, the other applicant that was not considered is the herb company in addition to Colonial. Okay.
I wouldn't mind going through it. In my viewpoint, and I expressed this before, I think, I'd love to sit down and analyze what you went through at 5 o'clock and have a chance to read through every single one, so I could take out my books too and compare what my thoughts might be. Not trying to step on your toes at all, because obviously the amount of time that you put in is a lot more than I put in on the subject, but at the same time, it's an important subject for the town, so I don't know whether you want to go through it now, but I'd rather have us talk about it now, but have this board come back, in my opinion, at a separate date dedicated only to this subject, so we can discuss the two applicants that you think are at the top and have a full discussion, but that's my opinion.
And in that construct, we would still go through the working group's recommendations
Yes.
tonight to understand what they are. We would set a date certain for when we would ultimately make an up or down decision.
Yes.
If that were the case and that was where we were going to proceed, I would actually recommend that we not give you our recommendation at this point, allow you to go into this without any kind of bias or without us filming the lily. I mean, it's,
I don't know what the board thinks, but that's my thought.
My personal preference is to have the benefit of all the review and the information and not have come to be a recommendation. I think a recommendation will probably come through as self-evident anyway, but I think that I prefer individual members of it, their subjective autonomy to make those decisions.
I think it was a good process. I think each of you would, in all likelihood, come to a similar determination.
I would disagree. Are you suggesting, Paul, that you don't want to see what the working group has
No,
put
I
together?
said I do want them to go through it,
Okay.
just short of a recommendation. If
I
you
agree.
share with me
Yeah.
your findings, I can figure out what your recommendation is, and I just don't want to, I think there's some value in the elected officials and the permitting and licensing process not deferring that role. And I think when you get into the business of entertaining recommendations, then you start giving that authority away.
I think you and I are on the same page here. I very much want to see what the working group has sort of identified for highly advantageous, inadequate. And I guess I would trust my colleagues as well to not be, I think we all think for ourselves maybe too much sometimes. So, even having all of these, no one's too afraid to disagree with another. So my sense is that I'd like to know what all these are.
Sure.
And if we're gonna set a date certain,
I don't know.
so be it.
So, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead. You're gonna do it anyway.
If that's the case, I would recommend with Chuck's radio voice that he should read all of the requirements, and then we can just give you the flat scores of each one instead of listing every score that everybody got. We have a tally of what their scores were, so you don't have to know which ones we voted highly advantageous, or what was the other term we used? We only used
Inadequate.
inadequate. So-
Just to get the topics, but not to go through, this is what.
Well, we can just give you the scores for each one, and you don't have to know where those scores placed. In other words, get a summary, but you don't know what we, as a working group, found as advantageous, highly advantageous, or inadequate.
I don't know if that would be helpful, you get an overall
But
score.
are you suggesting to name the applicant, though, in that process, Ed, or just,
I think we could.
Okay.
Yeah, we could, yeah. I guess I'm asking, so you're saying that I won't be able to see what you have scored? Personally, I'd like to see everything that you've done.
I guess that's
I
my
was thinking
sense
in the
too.
interest of time.
No, I appreciate that, but some of these, I feel very comfortable evaluating, but other ones require
some
maybe
discussion?
your much more studied perspective. For example, the specific nuts and bolts of the security plan, I would like to think I've looked at them, but I haven't looked at them nearly as much as you guys have looked at them, right? So there, I may be looking to your scores more, whereas in the, is it consistent with the surrounding community aspect, I can apply my judgment on top of that.
So there's a couple of ways we can do this. I can summarize this and get it out to the board individually. I can have it dispersed, Gene, I can do that,
You
right?
can't just share it as is?
I can do it right now. I can share something else with you.
No, I don't think he's saying that.
Get a copy of that, why can't we just get a copy?
That's fine.
It's been presented in a meeting, so it certainly can be shared at this stage. That is,
There's no narrative along with that. There was some conversation about, on one of the ones where we didn't come to consensus, where it was felt that one of the applicants, one of the members of the working group, didn't think that they got an advantageous score, they got a different score. So I'd want to include some of that justification, and there's some qualifications and contingencies really attached to those where, if this, then they would be advantageous, and we just need to get that answer to that question. So there's some narrative. If I photocopied this and sent it out, or handed it out to each of you, you would have the quantified document, but you wouldn't have the narrative.
No, but we'd have that, and then when we came back, say, in 10 days.
That's fine.
We can actually say to you, why did you vote this way? What were your thoughts and that type of thing? That's what I'm looking for.
I'm happy,
Is that the way you want to do it?
whatever the pleasure of the board is. I'm
Because it took us a good half hour to
Per-
review
per
each,
applicant.
per applicant, so we do need
with
some
some
time.
conversation and some discussion.
Right.
Do you think you could reasonably go through and give us the cliff notes, if you will, for an applicant? Here's where there's generally consensus, here are the three things, and take 5 minutes per applicant and run us through it?
So I think one of the things I was just looking through as I looked through this, they were very similar, frankly, where they scored. Where those exceptions happened, I think that my thought was going kind of down the same road, Chase, is that, where 1C, they didn't get the same, the two applicants didn't get the same score on,
I think that gives me useful information in the intervening week to, let's say it's a week, in the intervening week, to dig more deeply, to the extent that there's a disagreement in the working group. Okay, now, all y'all think it's all highly advantageous. I don't know, probably don't waste my time on that particular topic. But if there's 3 or 4 where there's discrepancies, then I know where to dig in and really invest my time and effort to evaluating.
yeah, again, bless you. Bless you. Whatever the pleasure of the board is. I'm willing to
I would
read this
suggest-
entire document right now, or?
I would suggest we
Read your voice.
come back and, if you want to read what the topics are only without giving a score tonight, but I'd rather plan on next week or sometime within 10 days where we can come back with everything.
Get us a copy of your, group work, and then give us a chance to read it, and then we can ask you questions when we meet again.
Right, yeah, we set aside some time. I don't think there's any advantage to reading through it
I don't
tonight.
think so either.
Yeah,
I
so,
very strongly disagree with that, in that going through it in a public session allows the public to see where the process.
oh,
Okay, I think that's assumed. I think the only difference I was suggesting is we get a chance to read it first, so that when we're.
and we'll do that the
when-
next meeting, we'll go through it.
How many more next meetings are there gonna be, I guess?
I don't disagree with that.
But you don't have a problem with with getting this tonight? I mean, granted, it was just generated,
So
but
what we did
no
discuss at
chance.
the last meeting is that the Board of Selectmen would trust the working group to come back with
Right.
this completed document. We've done that, so
I mean, tonight, I was prepared to try and digest this in real time and make an up or down decision. So,
Oh, okay.
to the extent that,
I could do that too, but I just wish we'd had it that bracket, frankly. You know,
I'm not prepared to make a decision tonight.
We'll just, I respect that.
my concern is that I'm good with not making a decision tonight. I want this information to be public. And I
it
think
is,
that.
it is right now.
As soon as it's recorded.
But it's,
Okay.
right now, any
So
member
we're
of the
gonna-
public who wants it, they can have a copy of it. I'd like a copy of it too, is all I'm saying, Chase.
I understand.
Mr. Chairman, however you want to proceed, if you want me to go through, just kind of give a Reader's Digest version or a Cliff Notes version, as Chase put it, of some of the disparities, I can do that. If you want me to submit this to each of you and, you know, make the record public.
I'd rather have you submit it to all of us, so we can have a chance. If we can come back in a week, I don't know if next Monday's open, what
Have
days,
that narrative.
and then have that be the final day.
Could we agree to try and get the, if that's gonna be the one topic and that's gonna be sort of the one element of this, could we agree to try and get the meeting packet up online as soon as possible, so then the entire public has the benefit of.
Now, we're talking about next Monday. We don't have a scheduled meeting next
I
Monday,
mean,
and
we
I have a
could-
conflict,
I'm
so.
away all this
Oh,
week.
right.
We can upload
I
that.
just said,
Sorry, yeah.
No.
The point being to disseminate this more than 2 days in advance to the public. I understand they can file an open records request, so on and so forth.
Nobody's implying that. They could have copies of it tonight for all I care. I would like a copy of it tonight.
Let me say this, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
go ahead.
All right, so we're a yes community. We took certain votes to put zoning in place. We accepted certain bylaws. We agreed to a 3% sales tax. We've had a number of meetings, some of us more than others. We've made a determination, and frankly, I would feel comfortable recommending both Littleton Apothecary and Community Care Collective. That's what the results bore out. And both of those applicants are trying to, they're businesses, they're trying to take the next step in the process. And because we're a yes community, I think we've got an obligation to them. This has been since April that we've had them down this road, where we've sent information back to them. We've said, okay, this is the deadline, we will have an answer by, we will have a cutoff at this date, and I think we owe it to the community and to these applicants to make a decision as quickly as possible at this point, because we've got all the information we're going to get.
I'm just saying,
I'm okay with,
I'm just saying, one more meeting.
okay, I'm okay with having that meeting, but I would recommend that we do it this week, frankly. I'm on vacation all next week, and in fairness to the residents and in fairness to the applicants, I think that we should try to.
I'm okay with doing it tonight, but I would have liked to have had that information before tonight.
Okay, we didn't have it available, but
No, I circulated that sheet.
this document was circulated.
Yeah.
Okay, all right,
But not
if it's the same.
Not the evaluation.
No, because we did
no,
the
no, okay.
evaluation
Not the
at
form
5
as
o'clock
filled
today.
out, but-
Yeah, no,
God, I've
no.
been sticking my foot in my mouth for the last 20 minutes here.
Yeah,
Because I've missed it.
So I don't,
Chuck, I completely agree with you that we owe these applicants a decision, and I am hesitant to kick the can down the road, weeks and weeks out. I would make my schedule work to do a meeting later this week.
And why can't we do it tonight? What was the outcome on that?
I'd rather have a chance to go through it. I wanna
Okay,
move forward.
so would I, but not having that, can we just go through it now? If it's so important to the town and to the applicants, then let's do
The point I
it.
wanted to make was that this was scheduled for like 25 minutes. I don't want to be here at 11 o'clock making other things. We have a chance to come back one at a time, where the only topic on the agenda would be this.
I think there's something positive to that if we can get it done and scheduled in a relatively expeditious manner.
so we need 48 hours if we're going to do it.
So the earliest meeting could be, let's say, Thursday at 9 a.m. Between Thursday and Friday, we could schedule a meeting to make it this week.
Thursday, I'm out. I can do Wednesday.
We won't make the posting threshold for Wednesday. Are you available on Friday?
What, Friday night?
Friday daytime. I mean, or
No,
first thing in the
they've got-
morning. It depends on the board whether you're comfortable scheduling it in the morning.
I could do
or-
a Friday morning. I don't know how convenient that is to the public.
It's super convenient for me.
Tonight's wicked convenient. We're here.
I mean, honestly, Joe's clearly not comfortable with moving forward with this tonight. I think we need to respect that. And I fully appreciate the board wanting to put an end to this or move forward with this. Let me phrase it that way. Didn't mean to say that out loud. I have other things, that I would like to move. This has been time consuming, let's put it that way. But we can't make this decision hastily. Really, I would prefer the other members take into consideration what the working group, that form that Chuck has, but also I'd like you to take a look at the applications closely based upon our responses. Like Chase said, if there was some areas where we didn't agree. And I think it's important that the other members of the board really look at those areas and come up with your own consensus.
That's all I'm looking for.
And so if we have to meet a week from tonight,
Well, I'm on vacation, but I can make myself available Thursday or Friday.
Friday morning I could do.
I can do Friday morning, but it
odd
has to be
time,
before 8, I need to be at work at 8:30. So,
Could do a 7 a.m. meeting. 7:30, if it makes it better. You probably won't need much more, well. How long
Right.
does it take you to, 20 minutes?
no, we were good a half hour on each applicant. And that was just the 4 of us. I'm sure this discussion's gonna be a lot,
Or maybe it won't,
Lot
because people
different.
will have the,
or maybe it won't be.
maybe a couple of,
But, right, there's just so much public interest with this. Is that fair to schedule it
No,
at 7 a.m. on a Friday
How
morning?
about late Friday afternoon, when you get out of work?
I'll be on the road. I'll be around Wednesday. I can be around Friday morning. Well, tonight?
You've already said that many times, Paul.
I know.
If-
This is crazy. We get the information, but we couldn't get it early enough, but now it's like we don't have enough time. It's 8 o'clock. We could spend the next hour talking about it and get it done. There's not a heck of a lot left on our agenda here that's time consuming.
I have my time to digest it, so I'm looking.
Okay, all right, then,
I suppose Saturday's an option. Just throwing it out there.
That's actually what I was thinking. Saturday morning could be convenient, but at least for me personally.
Oh, I've got it.
and
No, I
potentially for the
actually have a conference I'm going to.
how to make friends and influence.
No, Women in Leadership with Anna, actually, stop.
Well, we hope to see you all Thursday night at the form-based code
Right.
presentation.
Oh, yeah. Let's not
Oh,
take
that's
that.
a week from
Sorry,
Thursday.
That's right.
You have something Thursday, Paul?
well, Thursday would be too soon for open meeting law purposes.
No, Wednesdays.
No,
Thursday's
Wednesday,
not.
yeah, well, Thursday I'm out of town anyway.
Unless we did it Wednesday at 8:30.
Can't do
We'd have to post it now in order to.
Chase can't do Wednesday.
Right, quick, call Diane.
Can't get done here.
No, Friday morning, although, I can make it work, but I don't know to what value that is to the community. I mean, anybody chime me in?
Well, it is on the agenda for tonight. We do have the public here who want to speak. So we could, I don't know how much more public input we'll receive between now and the next meeting, so.
Well, obviously, we can let the public speak tonight, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely, right now, yeah,
Then meet early Friday morning.
right.
I think we post it Friday morning. If we can't do it, we just don't do it.
I can do Friday morning.
You mind if I open it up for questions?
I think it's a good thing to do.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So my question to you all, well, actually, my comment to you all is, as you do review the information that Chuck will provide everybody, and the 3 categories of highly advantageous, advantageous, inadequate, is, once you see the scoring, is to consider to have a recreational marijuana dispensary in town. What would you like to see in terms of, were they very heavily weighted as highly advantageous, or were they dispersed evenly between advantageous and highly advantageous? What would you want to see? So please consider that in your review of the responses that we put together, because I think that will also play into this discussion.
Okay, thank you.
It's good input, Anna, thanks.
Public comments?
Hi, Laura Borba from, my address, 29 Robinson Road. Almost at a different address. So this is in regards to community collective care, the proposed location at 531 King Street. That location is actually adjacent to our neighborhood. So we live on Robinson Road, there's a few of us here representing. It is a dead-end road that is filled with a lot of young kids. I think there are 13, if not 14, kids school age and much younger, and some even, new babies. And this location, again, abuts our neighborhood directly. In fact, Will will speak in a little bit to, he's directly impacted by this. As you think about the application review, I looked at some of the documents online, and it states that the board intends to review responses based on part of the following criteria. I won't go through all of them, but the two that I wanna, or the one especially that I wanna point out to you for your consideration when you review the location at 531 King Street is number 3, compatibility of the proposed location and use with adjacent neighborhoods and uses. For me, that is a very much a rejection, that application, that location is not compatible with a neighborhood that is filled with young kids. There are, of course, federal rules or state rules perhaps, dispensaries can't be within 500 feet of areas that have school-age children, so I would argue that that could be applied to our neighborhood as well. So it's just something, again, that I wanted to point out. This will significantly impact our neighborhood. I've submitted letters already, and I feel really strongly about this. Again, for the safety of my children, for the, our neighborhood, and what we have is really, really special, and you usually don't find this type of community and neighborhood these days anymore. So to have something like this potentially come in and abut, and just be an impact to our kids is really, of interest and concern for me. So I hope it would be of interest and concern to you as well. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Will Nadeau, 18 Robinson Road. I'm the property directly abutting the 531 King Street on the Robinson Road side, adjacent to the Baker House as well, which I believe is 11 or 10 Robinson Road. I'm sorry I haven't made all of these meetings, so if I'm raising concerns that have already been raised, they're concerns for a lot of us on the street. I agree with Lauren that the proposed location of this dispensary is inconsistent with the values put forth in the town's goals. In order to revitalize the town center, I think the perception as well as the significant impact of the traffic in the center of town are inconsistent with the goals for revitalizing the town center. I would urge you, as you guys spend the next 48 hours looking over the 22 or 23 criteria, to consider some of the points that are brought up. I know that the board has spent a great deal of time evaluating these criteria, and I look forward to seeing what some of those were, because they might be some of the ones that we brought up. A couple questions I had. I know there was a traffic feasibility study, and I was just wondering if the traffic feasibility study had been completed and how a significant increase in congestion this close to the town center impacts our goals to revitalize the town center and bring, I think, traffic to the businesses and not necessarily traffic that impacts that side of town, the 110 and Great Road intersections. And then the impact of a marijuana dispensary on the value of the Baker House that the town has purchased with taxpayer dollars. I just want to make sure that that was one of the concerns that was brought up. And then from a personal note, I have 3 kids and would echo Lauren's concerns that this town is a very attractive place for us to move. I am reluctant to be afraid of a marijuana dispensary and it to be misconstrued as the boogeyman, right? I'm getting up here and saying, I don't want, think of the children, right? And that's not what I want to do or want to say. I just think that putting it this close to a growing residential neighborhood, and this close to a town center that the town has spent a great deal of time trying to decide what we want our image to be in the state, is inconsistent with the values and the goals, and inconsistent with, as a taxpayer and a member of this town, my personal goals. So I'm absolutely in favor and voted for putting a dispensary in Littleton. I think it's a value to the town, and I think it does bring business to the town. And I understand that a great deal was put into the zoning regulations to try to find the right place. I have to just express that this is not the right place according to a great deal of us. So thank you for your time and all the efforts you guys have put in. I know it's a tremendous amount, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I guess that's it. Mr. Zeldin?
Michael Zeldin, I don't represent, but I am the chairman of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, and we did in fact spend a lot of time and resources of the town coming forth with a roadmap for the common. And I have to say that the issue of a marijuana dispensary did not enter into the consideration at the time. As a matter of fact, the zoning process for that didn't come until our process was well underway. I just want to make the comment that before we get too far, there is already in the neighborhood, this is not necessarily speaking against the concerns of people who live on Robinson Road or near the common, but there are already places serving and selling alcoholic beverages very close by. They're right in the neighborhood. There's in fact one there selling. The difference here is that the risks are unknown. And I think I have to remind people here that anything new carries a certain amount of risk associated with it. And right now, we just don't know what it is, and we can't be expected to know. And people who move here 3 or 4 years ago looking for a certain kind of lifestyle, I have to confess that it's very possible that the rate of change of lifestyles in not only Littleton, but all over this country are changing and changing very rapidly. So I think that when we go for deliberation about placing a facility like this, I think we should, as it were, take a close look and try to adjust our risk tolerance, because we really don't know. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Can I say one more thing off of that?
Okay, one more.
Am I allowed to?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Sorry, again, Lauren Borba, 29 Robinson Road. Just want to make a comment about the whole, that there's a liquor store towards the end of our street right there on Great Road versus this is a marijuana dispensary. That has actually been brought up to me by a family member of one of those applicants. The part that I get it, they're both vices, and I'm not against the vice of marijuana versus the vice of alcohol. They're about the same, right? But the difference, I think the difference is the fact that there are many liquor licenses. So they can support the demand that is coming to those liquor stores, because there's in every single town, and there's multiple per town. You can also go to, a restaurant and grab a beer or a glass of wine. The difference is that the demand for dispensaries today is going to be so much higher than there are, because there's limited locations and high demand. So the supply-demand creates a very different, in my opinion, scenario as compared to a liquor store. So it's not about the vice, it's about what it draws and the impact that it has to your community. Again, might be different in 5-10 years from now, could be a very different conversation, but today, the supply and demand are greatly different, liquor store versus a recreational marijuana dispensary. So,
Good point.
yeah, thank you.
Sean Abbott's 10 Trout Road. Mine was more of a question in terms of the process. When these sites, I understand it's a yes town, I understand you can grant licenses. I'm wondering if it goes to a town meeting once there's sites that are specific, because now you're voting on, yes, I want marijuana, yes, I want people to sell it, but maybe no, I don't want them to sell it on King Street. I was wondering if that goes to a public meeting that people can vote on it, because now you're voting on something specific versus something kind of vague.
Yeah, take that one.
So Sean, just appreciate your question. That would have been, that was a conversation that we had when we had a town meeting to establish the overlay. So the overlay outlined where in fact, I've got it here, it outlined where in fact we would allow for a dispensary.
Okay.
So in some of those conversations were had then, frankly, there wasn't a whole lot of pushback when the overlay was voted on and passed overwhelmingly. So that was the opportunity as a community to say, yes here, no there. Frankly, I mean, that's, so.
That was, I would say that was the first opportunity. The planning board special permit
That's a good point.
gives the community a lot of leeway to push back, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No,
The point being
It always
that
makes me look bad by being smarter than me. Does it all the time.
he's got a better beard. This isn't the end of the road. I mean, these applicants will tell you they're not even on the road yet. There's still a number of different steps, including a planning board special permit process that affords, frankly, more power to work with applicants to do specific things than we have. You know, we're as much an administrative body here to make sure the i's are dotted and t's are crossed. You know, take signage and take lighting and so on and so forth. You know, we're not in a position here to address those particular current concerns from the applicants. And that's exactly why the working group has 2 representatives from the planning board on it, because the next step is that we get to wash our hands of this and they get to live this for several more months as the special permit comes through. It's very, very exciting.
There's more steps than that, but Chase is kind of simplifying.
So I have another follow-up question. So is there still the Board of Selectmen saying voting on licenses at being 0, 1, or 2, or is that, it's definitely?
So once we were a yes community, the state says you have to have 20% of what's the license for off-premise alcohol. Off-premise meaning a package store, essentially, where you can buy liquor and take it off premises to drink it. So we have 7 off-premise licenses, or did at the time when we went through the state. And so we pushed back and said, okay, 20% of that, that's the state mandates, is 1.4. 1.4, back when I got beaten by the nuns, was you round down, because it was under 5. State's new math, if it's over 1 point anything, it's 2. So that's what dictated that we would have 2. And
Well, it dictates we're allowed to have 2. And this board has the right to say 2, 1, or 0.
That's my question.
Okay.
For cause, I think.
Yeah, so we're a yes community, so if we put out, if we're requesting for people to apply to open a dispensary in Middleton, because we're a yes community, and we say, okay, this is what we require for you to come to us and open one of these establishments. People have applied, meeting those criteria. 2 out of the 4 submittals, we considered as applicants, because they met those criteria. And we now have to make a decision whether or not we will grant any, just like a liquor license, if someone comes in to get a liquor license, we're the liquor licensing board as well. So,
So I guess you could still vote 0, is what you, if I understood it correctly?
with cause, if any of the applicants that came before us didn't meet our criteria and we had cause to deny them at this point, now they go from here, I'm gonna assume, let's say we grant 1 license tonight, just hypothetical. If we grant 1 license tonight, the next step is for that applicant to negotiate a host community agreement with the town, which is where we talk about, 3% sales tax and, what's in it for us. So we negotiate that host community agreement. Then they go to planning board and they have, right?
We're going to CCC first.
Before the planning board?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Then they go to CCC, which is the State Cannabis Control Commission, and they have to get approval, basically. They have to get the rubber stamp saying, okay, you can move forward because you've done this check mark and this check mark. Then they go, then they go for site plan approval, special permit, from planning board. So there are many hurdles for anybody that wants to get into this space to overcome in order to to make it happen. And after that, I guess they're in business and they have to survive the climate, whatever that might be.
Okay.
Does that answer for you?
No, that answers it.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you. Mr. Houston?
Rob Houston, 20 Meeting House Road. I have a question, actually, it goes back.
Excuse me, are you still at Meeting House
Oh,
Road?
55 Jennifer Street. We moved.
You're out of order.
Recently. I have a question that goes back to a comment earlier, and that is, the decision, the location decision for the one on King Street, which is the one I'm hearing about the most about, the location decision, is actually one that's part of the submission. It's not something that is subject to review by the planning board for purposes of their special permit, is it? It's not like they can say, wait a minute, you've got an HCA, host community agreement with the board of selectmen, we don't agree with your location, go find a new one. If you guys approve it and enter into a host community agreement, does the planning board have the authority then to say, no, we don't like the location?
If I may, through the chair. We have to review all the criteria for special permit and site plan approval, so if they don't meet the criteria for traffic or parking or lighting or signage, or if it's an aquifer water resource district, for whatever reason we wanted to improve that, there's a bunch of, there's teeth in our bylaw for special permit that we could still deny it. Not because of location, but because in that location, the traffic impacts are too great, or a number of other reasons.
But that raises an interesting question, though. Let's say the planning board were to deny the special permit, that would be only specific to that location, right? They could potentially come back to us and attempt to renegotiate a host community agreement at a different location, I guess.
I'm sorry to interject this confusion, but I'm confused by who has the authority over the location.
That's not. I don't know, but if it meets the criteria, it's in the zone.
I got it.
Yeah.
Understand that. But their question
still
was
could be
about
site issues.
the site
It
issue.
could be site issues that would not be related to the address, it would be related to the
It's
site.
in the zone, and you guys, and it meets the zone, because the zone's big. Bigger, not as big as the town, but it's a big zone.
Okay.
But that particular site might not be the best site for the community, even though it's in the zone.
But
The decision around that site is tonight or next week. It's not at the planning board, is the point I'm trying to make.
Well, I guess that, here's where the rubber hits the road. The planning board is not making a determination, is it the best or the worst site? The planning board is determining, does it meet the town's criteria for zoning requirements based on that site?
That site. That
That
was the
site.
point, that was really what I was trying to bring to the attention of the board this evening. That's all.
Okay.
Steve Swartz, 30 Robinson Road. I brought this up previously, but under the purpose section C, it does state it adverse impact to local area, residential area, traffic, and there's a whole bunch of other criteria that's associated with that, okay? Who has the responsibility to determine what an adverse impact is? Is it the selectmen? Because I've got two different opinions that says it's the planning board, and I got another one that says, yes, the selectmen have the ability to weigh that in determining whether or not they will grant a community host agreement. So who's ultimately responsible for looking out for the best interest of the community by determining what those adverse impacts are? Is it the planning board? Is it the board of selectmen?
So the criteria talks about, does the applicant minimize any adverse impact? So that's what we have to evaluate, that better in front.
That's what section C states?
Well, in this review that we did, it's 3A. But section C of the application you're talking about?
I'm talking about section C of the, what is it, 173-294, whatever section that is.
Zoning.
Okay, D that says you can only have a maximum of 2, and section C says, addresses the fact that there shouldn't be any adverse impacts.
So
So the 173, that's a zoning bylaw, so that would fall in the hands of.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, I'd like to defer to our town administrator.
So I'll just read a section which should answer the resident's question. The selectmen have the exclusive authority to weigh any adverse impacts to the town when deciding whether to enter into a host community agreement. But if we're talking about an application for a special permit, then the planning board has the exclusive authority to weigh any adverse impacts to the town within the scope of the criteria included in the zoning bylaw.
To further complicate things, here's the way I see it. The Board of Selectmen's role here is to address things that are incurable as far as the planning board process is concerned. That is, if the applicant came forward and said they want great big neon lights, I would essentially ignore that. I would assume that the planning board will take care of that. The adverse impacts to the town that are incurable, traffic is a curable concern, right? There's certain traffic mitigation measures can be put in place and so on. But if it was of such a scope that it was incurable, then it would be our responsibility to address that as a Board of Selectmen. But I'm not trying not to get in the way of what the planning board's ultimate authority is with respect to site plan review and issuing the special permit. So incurable, us, curable concerns, planning board. That's my perspective. I'm not sure that that's necessarily my colleagues, but maybe that confuses it more, maybe that gives you some more perspective.
Okay, we're all set. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I just have to ask the question, what about the Baker House? Okay, I mean, there's a lot of folks that are trying to put proposals in place for the Baker House. If we move forward with a host agreement for 531 Baker, we're gonna severely, King Street, sorry, we're gonna severely limit what we can do with the Baker House. No more museum, no more gathering spots for, the community, museum trips for kids, any of the stuff that they were trying to put forth. And that's a lot of money that the town has spent.
I appreciate that point. Frankly, we haven't seen any proposals for the Baker House, and we have to act on what's before us. And we certainly will have perspective, but I have my own opinions on what the town should do with the Baker House, but that's not, I take that into consideration, but I appreciate that perspective.
Just to add to what he said, what about the CPC? Aren't they trying to move forward with the Baker House?
Just address the chair and your name and address.
Sandy Swartz, Robinson Road. Do I have to stand?
That's fine.
Okay. Just to add what he said about the Baker House, I mean, the CPC, they're out trying to get grants for the Baker House. Are they just spinning their wheels and they're not going to be able to try to achieve something? It's going to be, it would be something really nice. It would be an asset for the town to have people come from all over to this museum. Something very, very unique. So is this going to go bye-bye? So should the CPC stop trying to get grants and whatnot?
Well, as a member of the Baker House Working Group, as a member of that as well, we brought forward a plan that anticipates going forward with a RFP process. We already have one interested party. There are other parties that may or may not be part of the RFP process that are interested, other people that are interested in the building privately, but have not encountered the prospect of being in location to the marijuana facilities being an issue at all. Not to say we won't later on down the road, but it hasn't come up as an issue.
I think we should also note too that when the town bought the Baker House, we were quite transparent that the objective there was to preserve the historical structure. In fact, probably every one of us is on the record at one point or another as saying that the town's money is still well spent buying the Baker House and then selling it to a private person for $1 as long as it had the historical deed restriction on it. So the town's objective there was to meet the historical objectives of preserving the structure. And if one of the good ways of doing that involves developing it into a museum, great, but there are a lot of ways to do that. But overall, the town's objective was to preserve the historical aspect of it, not necessarily.
And even more point is the district already existed when we bought the Baker House. the planning district was already on the books, correct? Yeah, well, last year we bought the Baker House.
We bought the Baker House.
Yeah.
But in any case, the objective was to preserve its historical nature,
Right.
not necessarily to drive a particular use forward.
Those uses are very much in play. We have not heard anybody voice a lack of interest on this basis.
And I think on the Baker House too, I mean, it's one of the criteria that are on here that each member has to decide upon. I might feel differently than Chuck and Cindy, and that would be my vote, because I have a concern about the Baker House, but that's individual choice on this application form.
So I think what you're referencing is historic district.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't have a historic district, but we certainly can have our own opinion, but we want to make sure that we retain the historic value of the Baker House, if we so choose. Each individual. But we don't have a historic district, which would potentially preclude us from being able to cite a dispensary.
I just have one last.
I think we'll end it right there. We've had enough. Unless you want to be real quick.
Yeah, it's just one very, very quick question. Lauren Borba, 29 Robinson Road. As part of the process, when you either accept or deny the applications, are you, and this I think started to come out a little bit, is there a scenario where you can reject an application based on a location, yet encourage them to reapply with an alternative location that would be better for the full community? Is that an option that you can consider?
That's a good question.
It's a great question. I don't want to misspeak, but my understanding is that we've got a zone, and both of these applications that we've reviewed are within the zone, and we need to make the determination if they're addressing any adverse impacts, whether it be parking or traffic, that kind of thing. So
Or adjacent
we
neighborhoods?
have to, pardon me?
Or adjacent neighborhoods?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's how it's worded, is with the, if they're addressing the adverse impact on adjacent neighborhoods or, traffic and that kind of thing. We need to make that determination. If we choose not to grant a license to any applicant, let's say we, for whatever reason, these two blow up and someone else comes in and if we choose not to grant a license to an applicant, we have to have good cause, because we are a yes community, we've got a process in place, and we need to make sure that we're doing the right thing and following our bylaws and our policies and those of the state. So
I guess I would just encourage
don't know that I
you to
answered
write-
your question, but
Yeah, I guess I would just say I encourage you to do the right thing for the applicants, but also do the right thing for the community as well. 'Cause I think
we always keep that.
both parties that,
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thanks. Appointments.
We have
Are we
three.
planning on Friday?
I'm sorry?
Are we planning on?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that, yeah. So Friday, 7 AM?
Yeah, 7 AM.
Let's do it.
I can do it.
Okay. Friday 7.
Awesome. Happy vacation.
For appointments, we have 3 boards and committees for potential appointments. We have the Agricultural Commission, the Clean Lakes Committee, and the Disability Commission. Mr. Chairman, if I may, through you, just summary. For the Agricultural Commission, we have 5 applicants for 3 positions. And not sure where the board stands on this subject, but in the case of the Agricultural Commission, it actually does speak to it in the bylaws that the Agricultural Commission is to provide an opinion on the vacancies or the open seats. They did make recommendations for 3 of the 5 applicants, and I believe the board's practice has been to hear very briefly from each individual, if they're available and interested to speak.
So if we may, I'll just go down the list of all the people who have put in an application. If you'd like to speak, you can. The first one would be Jamie Cruz. Would you like to speak? Jamie?
I don't think so.
Enough said.
This is, I don't know, I served, I think, since 2006, so by now I think you folks know me.
Tommy Jensen?
I went to a couple of the, I live on 12 Christina Street. I'm a horse trainer here in town. Have been running a business, riding instruction and training for 19 years, coming 20 in December. Active in the equine community, have a degree in biology, very interested in agriculture and conservation as two different things that work in an interconnected manner. I went to a few agricultural commission meetings last year and found the group of interest to spend time with. They're a great group of people, and I'd love to spend some more time and be able to help out with where I can and where I can't. And so I was invited to come and visit, and I was invited to come back to apply this year when there were some openings. So I hope you consider that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Matthew?
Hi, I'm the manager at Littleton Community Farm. It's my second year. I've been working in agriculture since 2009. And I'm just interested in getting more connected with my community.
Thank you. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to.
Okay.
Christine?
I was born on a dairy farm and raised on a hog farm. In addition to our family's livestock operation, we had a maple sugaring operation and a Christmas tree farm. I helped build and run Littleton Community Farm here in town. And I'm building a permaculture farm on my own land right now. I'm also working with small farmers in another community here in Massachusetts to help them craft farmer-friendly bylaws for their town. There appeared that there was some confusion about my status as a farmer. It is true that I do not earn a paycheck as a farmer, but I was born a farmer and I have been one all of my life. The town's bylaw requires that applicants be, quote, engaged in farming, employed in an agricultural field, and/or with knowledge/experience in agricultural practices and businesses. So I fit the bill there. For the last 3 years, I've occupied a farmer seat on AgCom. I have not missed a single meeting. Last year, I was elected clerk because my predecessor had conflicting town committee obligations and missed so many meetings that AgCom didn't have a consistent record of minutes. I have expressed my concerns over the lack of progress to the Board of Selectmen in creating RFPs and leases for town-owned agricultural lands. The creation of a conservation restriction for Church Meadows is 6 years past due. It has taken my entire year as clerk to obtain drafts of documents that were created by AgCom and the Agricultural Lands Working Group, drafts of these RFPs and leases for the town-owned lands that were created before my time on AgCom. I'm dedicated to process and devoted to the public record. As clerk, I keep excellent written records of our meetings and communicate effectively with town administration and other boards. It is true that I've occasionally had differences of opinion with AgCom. 2 of our votes in the last year were split, and I was in the minority, though not alone, on both of those. Differing opinions are important for healthy boards and committees. And though AgCom recommends removing a voice of different opinion, the Board of Selectmen risks creating an AgCom that does not, quote, reflect the diversity and scale of agricultural businesses and the diversity and scale of the town's population. In keeping with the stated goals of AgCom, my largest priority is getting the leases of our town-owned agricultural lands in order. I understand the board's challenge here. I'm asking you to vote contrary to AgCom and against new Littleton resident farmers and another AgCom member who is a very highly respected member of our community. With his many other board memberships in town, Andrew's contributions can continue. Despite the challenge before the Board of Selectmen, I am the best choice to serve Littleton as a member of the Agricultural Commission.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, the pleasure of the board.
If I'm wrong.
No. Andrew?
Yes, hi. So, Andrew Samarco, I've served on the board since December of 2019 as an alternate member and as a full member. I think I've done my best to serve the community, the agricultural community at large. I don't have much to add. I'm certainly familiar with agricultural practices in town. Do my best to support it. Support the practice of agriculture in town. It's true that there have been meetings that I haven't been able to make due to scheduling conflicts, but I'm certainly devoted to the cause, attending meetings and. Oh, and yes, I certainly bring a conservation voice to the CONSCOM, which is an important factor to consider. Conservation is certainly linked with open space, agricultural properties, so things to consider.
Thank you. Thoughts by the board?
Well, this is one of the committees where the existing committee has made recommendations. I wonder if there's somebody who's prepared to speak to those recommendations from AgCom.
We, at our previous meeting for appointments, we discussed representing the diversity and scale of the agriculture in Littleton, and we're fortunate to have Tommy reapply as part of the equine community. That's something we haven't previously had on the AgCom, and we're trying to have that representation to increase the continuity between the different agricultural groups, commodity groups, and what have you. We're also considered Andrew and Christine as the citizens at large. Andrew's been on it for some time and been involved quite a bit. He does bring the continuity between the AgCom and the other boards that he's on, which has been helpful in some of the communications with helping with the RFPs that we've been working on with you folks to develop. He's also a source of information about other properties that might be being considered for town-owned land. It does bring in a unique kind of set of circumstances where we get more information without having to have a whole lot of back and forth and back and forth. He can kind of give us the information right at the meeting because he's in the know. I do support the AgCom's decision to recommend 3 individuals, Jamie, Andrew, and Tommy. If there's any other questions I can answer, I'm happy to do so.
Thank you.
I think, to Paul's point, we've asked for boards to give us recommendations in the past. Don't always get them. We did in fact ask for recommendations, the recommendations here, so. Although I think we have some qualified candidates. I respect the AgCom, their decision. They're the ones that are operating.
It's an interesting point, though, that by asking boards for their recommendations, and Paul, you expressed frustration at their recommendations in the past.
Don't interpret my comment of asking for their opinion,
No,
but I
no.
actually like
I know.
the process of asking for their opinion.
That's precisely my point, that I haven't heard that point put forward before, the idea that by asking a board for their recommendations and following it wholesale, we are incentivizing groupthink, if you will, right? You know, a board of people is most likely to recommend someone who thinks like them, and you actually move in a singular direction absent a diversity of thought. It's a compelling notion here to consider. And usually, frankly, we don't have a lot of disagreement among our boards, but, or at least that rises to our ears. It's a compelling thought that's got my attention. Yes.
Any other thoughts? It's a tough call.
Yeah.
I just think a workable committee is what I'm looking for. In the future, that's gonna be of extreme importance.
Andrew, let me ask a question.
You sure can.
So Andrew, you're currently a full-time member?
Yes.
Okay. There are alternate
No,
openings?
the alternates were phased out.
Okay.
That's right, Tim.
I mean, can we get this moving anyway with respect to the farmer membership?
If I may add something, I'm Jamie Cruz, Springdale Farm. I'm currently serving as a farmer position I have since 2006. I am one of 4 of the largest privately held agricultural lands in Littleton, so I have a lot at stake when it comes to this committee, this board. I have served time in Washington, D.C. with the Young Farmer and Rancher Committee and have served in lots of capacities here as an advocate for agriculture. There's a lot of things that your board is unaware of when it comes to advocating for our industry. We are very fortunate to live in an ag-friendly community. The AgCom is there when we're assigned and asked to complete some tasks. I think one of the hardest things we've been juggling with is some of the land, the agricultural land that the town of Littleton owns, and how to best manage that without disrupting those that are currently farming it or running it as a business of their own. We're also fortunate because we have such young blood on the Agricultural Commission, and it's greatly diverse. We have somebody that serves for government relations with the Massachusetts Farm Bureau Federation. We have dairy farmers, we have first-generation farmers, and we also have somebody that serves as a link between the CONSCOM and the Agricultural Commission. For years, we have missed the position or somebody that is in the equine field. That is the most, I guess that's the #1 agricultural profession here in Littleton. It outweighs all the fruit, vegetable, and livestock production. So we were really excited to have Tommy apply. She made a really great point. We're all about saving open space. That's what every single one of us wants on the board. But conservation and agriculture are 2 different versions of saving open space. Andrew serves as a link between the CONSCOM and the AgCom and has come in extremely handy through time. I am one of the farmers that was targeted, one of 3 farmers that was targeted by one of the individuals that is applying for the Agricultural Commission that is in front of you. There was an email circulated a couple years ago that shamed, humiliated, and really was a defamation of character on some of the farm businesses in town. I know that some of you that are seated at that board table have become aware of that email. I think that it's really important to have folks that are strong advocates for agriculture, can set their personalities aside and concentrate on what is really important, and that's making sure that our farms thrive and that they have a voice at the table.
Thank you. And I have seen that email. Tommy?
Yeah, may I just add, as far as to Chase's comment about having a groupthink board, I think one of the things that I appreciated about spending time with the Ag Commission on several meetings last year, and over the years developing individual relationship with Jamie just as a customer, is that we don't all think alike. We don't all have the exact same perspective on the world and how it fits together, and I think one of the things that's been really compelling to me is that in those meetings and in my interactions with the individual Ag Commission members, is that they're willing to listen and to think on different perspectives if it's presented in a way that is not confrontational and negative, but instead is a, hey, what about this perspective, and is there a way to fit that in to what's already being pursued as an ultimate end goal, which is continuing to have an active agricultural community, as well as having serious roots in, conservation of the land around that agricultural community. So I don't think that there's a groupthink perspective as much as it appears, because to be blunt, grown-ups can talk to each other without it turning into a conflict if they actually are respectful and thoughtful about the other person's opinion and integrate what works and what doesn't based on the circumstance.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I would go with the recommendation of the AgCom. We want them to work together.
Not a motion. Move the Board of Selectmen vote to appoint, as recommended by the, can we do it that way, Nina? As recommended by the AgCom?
Probably.
Probably. Jamie
but-
Cruz,
yeah.
G. Tommy Jensen, and Andrew Samaco to the AgCom for a term expiring June 30th, 2022.
Correct.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I think it's worth reiterating that it's not an easy choice, and I think we have 5 good candidates, and I like to defer to, as many farmers on there as possible, especially a diverse representation of the farming community, and I also like to defer to the Farm Agricultural Commission itself, but that's not without some difficulty, because, other people who come forward to serve, they have a right to have their piece said. Take some comfort that in our 2 non-farmer, at least as they're listed candidates, both of them have an opportunity to serve the town prospectively in different ways, and I hope both the one we appoint and the one we don't will. So I would support that motion as well.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Thank you.
Thank you all.
What's the next one? Clean Lakes Committee? We have 1, 2, 3, 4 vacancies and 2 applicants. Gerald James here?
Mr. James was the individual who spoke at Citizens in Business Time, the one that I asked the board to allow me to work out with the police chief, but I believe he's since left.
Is Stephen Hayden here?
Choked us.
Is he all right?
I don't know.
Brad's been sick for like 3 days.
I guess, in reference to Mr. James, it appeared he didn't get sworn in last year. If we appoint those 2, I just hope we remind all the applicants that they have to get sworn in.
That's what you do.
Yes, in fact, Cindy, I believe, had put a letter together that's co-signed by Chairman Knox and herself, reminding applicants of just that.
Yep.
Nice job.
Thanks.
Okay.
So we good? Ready for a motion?
Yeah.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to appoint Gerald James and Stephen Hayden to the, do I need to identify, hang on, time out, strike all that. Do I need to identify which
I guess you could say
neighborhood
to appoint.
association they go with?
Oh,
Oh, no, I'm sorry, it's here in the proposed affiliation. My apologies, John. I'm going to start that over. I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to appoint Gerald James to the Citizen at Large and Stephen Hayden to the Mattawanakee alternate positions on the Clean Lakes Committee for a term expiring June 30th, 2021 in the case of Mr. James, and 2020 in the case of Mr. Hayden.
and just one clarification. One was an alternate and the other does not appear to be an alternate.
That's right. Mr. James is a citizen at large. Mr. Hayden is a Mattawanakee alternate.
Second.
Motion made, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, Disability Commission. 2 vacancies and 2 applicants.
Yes.
Okay, is
Aye. You sure?
is Eric here? No. Luigi?
Luigi's not here.
No. Make a motion.
Somebody's got to help me with Luigi's last name here, though.
Yuccavalli.
Yuccavilli.
Yuccavello.
Yuccavello, okay, very good. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to appoint Luigi Yuccavello and Eric Manser to the Disability Commission with terms that expire on 6/30/2022.
Amanda?
Two.
Yuccavello.
In the case of Mr. Trying to make this quick and I'm screwing it up. Mr. Manser with the term to expire on June 30th, 2022, and Mr. Yuccavello with the term to expire on June 30th, 2023.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, so that's it for the.
Sorry about that, Joe.
It was good, though.
If anybody can figure out what I moved.
There is much.
Mr. Chairman, if you'd be willing to take item number 11 out of order, I believe we don't have anyone else waiting in the audience for specific agenda items, except for number 11, scheduled waiting items, as that is, for the Director of Finance and Budget Town Accountant.
Sure.
Is she gonna be high maintenance like? Just kidding.
So, Cheryl, if you would just please come up and have a seat.
Wherever I go, Joe. Make friends wherever I go.
Yeah.
So, and maybe, actually, I should have offered you the opportunity to say hello to each board member. Cindy Napoli.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Joseph Knox. Chuck DeCoste. Paul Glavy. And to your left, Chase Gerbig. You've met Anthony Ansaldi, our Assistant Town Administrator. So if I may, Mr. Chairman?
Please.
Thank you. Ms. Cheryl Herrick Stella comes to us as an applicant, obviously, for the Director of Finance and Budget / Town Accountant position. And just high level, Ms. Cheryl Herrick Stella certainly stood out as an applicant to the screening group, consisting of myself, the Assistant Town Administrator, yourself, Mr. Chairman, the chair of the former chair of the Finance Committee, Fred Faulkner, our interim Finance Director, as well as our Human Resources Administrator. And Ms. Herrick Stella has 3 years of municipal accounting experience, and also, in addition to that, 12 years of financial analysis experience, of which 10 years were in a supervisory capacity. I don't want to steal her thunder, because she's got a lot of experience here, but she does have munis experience, and from all accounts that I can see, an absolutely great attitude. So if I may, I'd like to turn the floor over to Ms. Herrick Stella and ask her to say a few things, and then certainly the board may wish to ask her questions as well.
Take it away, Cheryl.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you for having me here. I'm really excited about the opportunity here at the town of Littleton. As Nina pointed out, not to steal my thunder, but I do have some extensive private sector experience in a wide variety of positions. One of the greatest things that Cambridge Associates allowed me to do is actually manage people. And I just truly enjoyed working with individuals, helping to mentor them, develop them, train them, professionally develop them. I had a very great career at Cambridge Associates. Like I said, I was there for 12 years. Decided that I needed a little bit more work-life balance once I had a family. Entered the public sector in a position with the town of Ipswich. Kind of got my feet wet there, loved it. Been with Swampscott for the past 2 years. I say it feels like 10 years, and I only say that because we've accomplished a lot as a team there in Swampscott. We've revamped the budget. We've gone through a tax rate setting process. We've done cost of contract. We've analyzed anything and everything we could possibly analyze. And I'm really happy with the accomplishments that we've been able to accomplish there as a team. I think between my two kind of backgrounds, public and private, I think I can really add some value here at Littleton. I've had a chance to really get to know Nina and Steve and Ann through this entire process. I really am looking forward to working with them and digging in and helping out.
Let the board know, too, how impressive her her interview was, the first thing that she said, one of the first things she said was, one of the most important things is working with the Board of Selectmen, so that. There was a-
So she knows her audience.
There was a big check mark right there.
He's easy. You want him right away. He's a softie.
So I'll leave that to the board. I did have a chance to sit through all the interviews. I was very impressed with Cheryl. I'm glad you're here. We can't wait for you to get working with that great department.
I'm
And you
excited.
are working with some outstanding people, so. Board members, any questions?
I'll jump in. The elephant in the room for me is your commute. And so I just, having done 52 miles each way for the past 8 years, it takes a toll. You talk about work-life balance and a lot of responsibility. I know the questions have been asked of you, so I hope that we're able to strike that balance for you, but we have high expectations of you as well. So I think communication and creating expectations in both directions is important for us.
Absolutely.
And we just want to make sure that you're happy and that we're heading in the right direction and we're getting stuff done.
Yeah, no, and I can understand anyone looking at my resume and say, oh, really, why, but, I really do feel like this is the right next step for me in my career. I've commuted in and out of Boston for 12 years, except for the 2 years I spent in the DC area, where I actually had a 5-minute commute when I worked down there for Cambridge Associates. But I'm used to commuting. That was something that, really, was honestly something I thought long and hard about. And I just know that this is the right place for me. I know that this is the where I can kind of expand upon what I've done so far in Swampscott, and I feel that there are some areas here that I can just add value immediately and hit the ground running, and I'm well prepared for the commute, and I'm a hard worker, and I have high expectations of myself, so I wouldn't expect anything less from you guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
So, you started in Swampscott a couple of years ago, right? So, that transition, what lessons learned are you gonna bring from that transition to Swampscott to here, so that you can, in fact, right, hit the ground running? Like, we're not a huge organization with, dozens of finance people.
Right.
There are only a few people, and we need you to help us tomorrow, right?
Sure.
So how do you translate the lessons learned from Swampscott to here and translate that into what that means for, day one, week one, month one here?
Sure. So I think, one of the lessons I learned going from Ipswich to Swampscott was just how different a community is from community to community. And, one of the things I did from almost day one was revamp the budget. And the lesson that I learned from that was, spending a little bit more time listening to department heads, getting to know departments, getting to know Finance Committee, Board of Selectmen, what their priorities are. That was a great process to go through, because it then allowed me to build those relationships with all those individuals. And I think that's extremely important in my position. I have to be able to manage relationships with a number of different people, but still be able to say, no, I'm sorry, that's against the law, but in the nicest possible way. And that's not easy. And that took some time to learn how to finesse some of those conversations, even if they're conversations with a town administrator or an elected board. And so I think I've learned how to sometimes say no in a little bit more of a delicate manner. I tend to be fairly straightforward and direct. And so I've learned to get the same message across, but maybe in a little bit softer manner.
That was insightful, thank you.
Great question, great answer. I don't have anything else to add. Thank
You
you.
know how to say no.
Well,
Take some lessons.
just,
Softer part. Sorry.
Great resume. You look to be a very qualified candidate. We have great faith in the folks that speak highly of you internally, so can't wait for you to get started.
Great, thank you so much.
That's it. We just need a motion.
And I would move that the Board of Selectmen vote to confirm the appointment of the town administrator of Miss Cheryl Herrick Stella for the position of Director of Finance and Budget, Town Accountant, and pursuant to MGL Chapter 41, Section 108N, to enter into an employment contract between the Town of Littleton and Miss Cheryl Herrick Stella for the 3-year term expiring on June 30, 2022, for the position of Director of Finance and Budget, Town Accountant.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Thank you.
The official signing now as well, at least the beginnings of it. You have some copies, or I have some copies, either way. One-sided or two-sided, madam?
She's a lefty.
I am.
Oh, wait a
You have to
minute.
watch.
Should've thrown a ball at her.
Yeah.
I thought lefties couldn't be number people.
Yeah, I do everything else for
Thank you so much. We'll get a copy of the contract too, once it's fully executed.
Thank you so much.
So we said first day is in early August, is that right?
August 5th.
Good. We'll come to appreciate quickly our space needs study.
Wow.
August is a tough one.
Thank you very much.
Welcome aboard, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Once again. Yeah, please don't do that. We want you to come in next time. Thank you, Stephen, as well.
You can't do Thursday.
No.
Okay, 8 is the Board of Selectmen's goals.
At this point, we have received another set of goals from the Clean Lakes Committee. And, you know, admittedly, I have been wanting to put goals together to also share with the board, which I have not done. I know some members of the board also have not had a chance to submit theirs as well. I think really what we need to do in the coming, before the next meeting, is for all of us to get up to that point and identify a date and time to discuss it again. Happy to.
Good. I was just gonna say, we discussed before, I think, probably the last time we discussed this, as this being a great candidate for having one of our posted meetings, that's a, you know, restaurant dinner meeting where, you know, it's not wholly informal, but it's informal just by the setting, but have this the sole topic for it. And I don't know what people's schedules sound like. Next week's not gonna work for you, but,
You guys can meet, right?
well, I
We'll
don't
phone it in.
We're doing breakfast meetings now, right?
that too, but I would think just another, you know, even the, when is our next meeting? Our meeting is the 29th,
29th, I believe.
the 30th, is everybody around then? We could meet and,
Oh, just go bang, bang.
yeah,
Yep.
that way you
That
don't have to hook
works.
check.
I can do the 30th.
You do the 30th?
I can do the 30th.
And then, of course, we still all have to, those that, us that haven't yet, get our,
I appreciate that she had the tact to not name names there.
no, I'll self out. I'm still here in scrawled form. It's here, it's done, it just hasn't been submitted, but
Mine are voice memos on my phone. So you at least put pen to paper in a literal sense.
But if we get nagged enough to get those done in advance, then we can have them in advance and discuss everybody's perspectives in that kind of setting.
So remind board and self to submit
Right.
goals, got it.
Right. Does that,
Remind
Mr. Chairman, sound like a
delinquent members.
good idea to you?
Yeah, it's fine.
You can pick a restaurant of your choice.
So the 30th,
Yes.
time? 6?
6.
Yes.
Six.
Yeah.
Okay.
Michelle Club.
That's being Littleton, I think.
It has to be in Littleton.
Just
Oh, okay.
trying to get a reaction, that's all.
Okay.
I say we do it at Baker House. Are we catered?
I don't know if
Have
I'd
we, no?
little
Get some
premature
takeout?
on that there.
Okay,
So we're all set for the 30th?
yes.
Gandalf's Cafe?
Yeah. He slowed down in his production. Number 9, memorandum of agreement between administrative and oversight of Littleton Sewer Department, Light and Water Department, Department Commissioners. Are we going to go with you and Chase?
Looked like we got there was an exchange of emails from, probably by
I
Nick.
think Nick started it.
Yeah, but it looked like we got a group that can meet next Monday. Right, was that what it was, Monday,
Yeah,
Monday
it's
morning?
Monday morning, I'll look at it.
Right.
But Cindy's helping us draft the MOU, right?
So she got a draft that she submitted, we'll certainly use it.
Did you get my email today?
I
Okay.
didn't know if it was just to me or if it was to.
No, it was to you and, just you and Paul.
Oh,
Yeah, so, and I
Yeah,
think they appointed 2 people from the commissioners.
yeah, they've
to be
had
part of
2
that
people
group.
already.
Yeah, good.
I think
It's Chairman Carr
and Bruce. Yeah.
And I'm not sure if you would like me to be present at that meeting, but I didn't pay close attention to the date and time of that meeting. Do you know?
I don't think we have a time yet, but it's next Monday morning.
yeah, I don't think we had set a time, just Monday
Yeah.
morning, so.
Yeah, and you indicated early, again.
So the 2 of you at the,
Yeah.
And we have a 8:30 a.m. personnel board meeting. If we could do, if you'd like me to be present, then if we could do after that, that would be great. If you don't need me to be present, then that's fine too.
We're gonna be bringing it back to the board. I mean, I don't know that that's a,
I don't know
A
if
deal breaker.
Mr. Lawler's I don't know at this point, if Mr. Lawler's attending, if,
Could see if they want to do it Tuesday. Could you do it Tuesday morning, Paul?
I
They
can,
could.
yeah, I mean, I wasn't,
Let's coordinate schedules via email and see if we can make it possible for you to attend. I mean, I
earlier
think,
better? Does earlier work on?
I don't know
I don't
why,
think that's an issue.
why the morning was proposed. I just happened to
Okay,
suggest earlier is better for me.
we'll work out a date.
I can figure it out.
Okay.
Okay. All right, moving on, number 10. Number 10 is Facilities Manager, Building Commissioner position openings. Nina, if you want to take that?
Yeah, well,
Certainly. At the last meeting, when we had an item for facilities manager posted, it was suggested, it was very late in the evening that day, and we really didn't have an opportunity to discuss it at length. It was suggested that we bring this back at a future time. In speaking just briefly with individual members, not having spoken with the entire board, we also received notification that the building commissioner will be retiring in early September. And it was suggested that it would be beneficial to at least have a discussion on whether or not there should be any type of merging of the positions, or perhaps different structures that could be considered in this scenario where we basically have 2 openings. The other point is, you may discuss it and choose to decide that it's perfectly fine as 2 separate positions, but going through the matrix of discussing the building commissioner position, especially how it might closely relate to facilities manager, there are perhaps pros and cons to making combinations or leaving them separate.
How much do they really overlap, though?
Well, I will say that in another community, I did look at combining positions, but we had 2 part-time positions. And so I think it's a little bit different where you might have similar skill sets and you might need similar knowledge where you can combine 2 part-time positions. I'm certainly looking for the board's opinion on this subject, and you know the community better than I do as I'm still learning. But, there is concern that if you have a facilities manager and a building commissioner at the same time, we're talking about 2 full-time positions. So if you were to structure it, I believe we're talking about 2 full-time positions. If you were to structure it in such a way that you had, let's just throw names out there, facilities manager / building commissioner, and then assistant facilities manager and local building inspector, I don't know how much of a benefit there would be to that if they were 2 full-time positions, because now you're asking 2 individuals to wear 2 hats instead of asking 2 different individuals to focus on their respective functions. But I'm not trying to discount that there may be other thoughts and opinions by the part of the board members who may feel that there's a better structure that could be combined for a most effective organization.
I just see them as being so, right, at their core, right, maybe the same type of skill set, but so fundamentally, such a fundamental difference in their focus, right? The facilities manager is internally focused. Our town facilities, the building commissioner is quite the opposite.
And yet it's been anticipated that it would be in that office since it was funded. I mean, I am one who said we should hit the brakes and give some thought to, since both positions are gonna be open at the same time, is there a logical synergy, and what's the best way to construct that? I think a couple of members of this board, as well as somebody from PMBC, planning board, and maybe the school department who are involved with facilities part of it should sit down and talk that through with appropriate staff and come back with a way of, leave it alone and just have this person, the new facilities manager, be what he's gonna be or what she's gonna be, and then answers to the building commissioner, or no, take it out separately and answer directly to the administrator, or who knows, some other thing.
Right. How do we organize the org chart, and then does that dictate the responsibilities, or vice versa? Do we align the responsibilities and then build the org chart afterwards?
Rather than just address it in this setting exclusively, we already have those other boards who are in dialogue relative to the facilities manager, not the planning board. I would just suggest adding them into the dialogue, since they deal with the building commissioner probably more than anybody does. And have a small group to, talk it through for a couple of weeks and bring back a proposal to this board.
I mean, the one upside to, right, housing them together is that the town projects, we can make sure that the town projects are done the right way, right? We're actually pulling the permits for the town projects, that, they're coordinated, and that the town has a
Taking full advantage of the
regulatory
resources
body.
in that
Yeah,
office,
exactly.
too.
And that expertise. So I can get my head around that, but I agree, it would make sense to pull in some different perspectives here.
Mr. Mullin, can I call on you for
If I may.
Perspective.
No, honestly.
So whether it's 1 position to 2 positions, the only thing I would say in my experience as a building inspector and zoning enforcement officer in the city of Newton, where they had a chief of operations for the school department, i.e. facilities manager for that division, and then they had facilities separate for the town of a big city, of course. Because the chief of operations in schools didn't fall under any one's direction in building, he ran roughshod over a lot of required building permits. The city's now being sued for carbon monoxide poisoning of a janitor and a maintenance worker because they failed to pull proper permits. So I would say, however you talk about, just something to consider is that whoever gets the facilities position, whether it's combined or it's one person, that they do have to at least answer to pulling building permits and following proper protocol for facilities management. That's all I wanted to add.
Absolutely.
Thank you for volunteering to help us do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that Undoubtedly,
That's
it's
what
gonna
that
be the
was.
responsibility of the town to make sure that it's pulling permits and whatever function or whatever makeup that looks like. There's no doubt, we may waive the permit for ourselves, of course, even if it's our own contractor, because they'll pass that cost back to us, but, that is that would be an expectation, absolutely. In hearing from, one building official that may work for the town of Littleton, the building commissioner's perspective, and I didn't specifically ask him if I could share this, but I think it's relevant. He felt that there wouldn't be a checks and balances if you didn't have them separate. Now, I think that there's a potential for that. So that if the facilities manager were to try to see more gray in the code, because that person was also the building commissioner, that was his point to me. Just want to let you all know what he said to me. And then certainly, there's, reporting structure is in question as well if they are separate positions, but I think it could be structured as separate positions and function well as long as it's clear in the job descriptions that there are certain expectations and there are certain steps that must be followed. Not having spent a tremendous amount of time in this organization, I think separate positions would work well here. If we had part-time positions, I would feel differently.
In a bigger picture sense, even if we didn't have all these vacancies and/or new positions, we just simply had the one thing to change at the top. That in itself, I think, warrants reconsideration. It's one of my primary goal points this is the proper time to do a check as to, do we have the structure we want? Do we have people set up in a way that it most effectively gets missions done? You couple that with all the vacancies we're filling right now, and it's the perfect opportunity, I think, to re-examine all that sort of thing. So I'd hate to see an opportunity go by, even in microcosm, and I'd love to incorporate it into a bigger study, but we can't make the world halt either. But I'd at least like to view these two positions, invite in other boards that interact with them, and add their 2 cents worth into the mix.
Do you want to call boards in or members of boards?
Just a member from each of those boards to work with a couple members of our board, and I'm not volunteering myself. I've got plenty of assignments, but I'd rather see a couple other members.
As far as the building commissioner position, I think you will all tell me that we've had the facilities manager on our radar for quite some time. We've wanted to do it.
We used to have one.
We used to have one. The building commissioner position at this point, I would say, is the more time-sensitive one, not to discredit the importance of the facilities manager position, but, I would want to make sure we continue to keep up with permitting and service requests by builders and developers and public, residents of the town. So that one, I believe that our current building commissioner is willing to assist us to whatever extent and capacity he can. So I do believe that there's flexibility, and I appreciate that on his part, but I don't want to, it seems that, we as a community go through a very rigorous and thoughtful process when appointing people, which takes time. And before we know it, it's going to be September 3rd, and our building commissioner is going to be retired, theoretically. So I would just encourage the board, if we're going to go through an analysis process, that we do it with haste.
Do those things have to be mutually exclusive? Can we get the position posted? If we as a board of selectmen decide that the facilities, org chart aside, right? The facilities manager and the building commissioner are different people, then why don't we just post the building commissioner job now?
I agree.
And then we figure out the org chart stuff later. Like you said, Nina, we've gotten along, if not fine, we've gotten along anyway without a facilities manager. We have a little bit of time to sort that out.
I'd like to take a look at the current job description for the building commissioner before I jumped and did that, because there might be responsibilities there that you'd want to see in the facilities.
You want to shift around a little bit.
But I'm all for setting the outside time limit on this just to be a couple of weeks or so to do this exercise.
Perhaps to your point, perhaps making the decision at the next board meeting? on the job description as the goal?
Providing that the task actually gets done in between now and then, meaning a couple members of our board and the various boards we just mentioned are able to get together, review different models and current, in different communities, as well as job descriptions, and do that. I mean, they may be able to do that in a couple of meetings over a couple of weeks' time.
A couple phone calls.
Yep.
Which boards are we talking about, besides the Board of Selectmen?
I had suggested planning board, PMBC, and then because the facilities are dependent on school participation, schools as well.
I may add the ZBA.
Yeah.
Want to be represented,
Yeah.
because
Well, that's
typically people go to.
that's a really good
people
point.
Go to the ZBA
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
of.
Yeah, right,
Yep.
right.
Yeah, the good point, didn't mean to exclude them.
So if you had a planning board member, a PMBC member, a school committee member, a board of selectmen member, a ZBA member, the town administrator, that's 6 people.
Could we add an ex officio member of the administration to that?
I mean, are you looking to make it subject to the open meeting law? Probably not, so
Bartender from Taka,
if you're,
meeting place.
Yeah, I guess probably not, but.
so,
I had mentioned 2 selectmen,
2 selectmen.
if it's possible.
Well, Chuck already volunteered, so we need
You
none
heard
of that.
that?
I'll volunteer.
There you go.
I love working with Chuck. The more time I can get with him, the
That's the
better.
upside.
So
Joe,
how-
you are in a dangerous spot there, my friend.
Are we looking for one
Ann, did you hear
member of the school committee member, one member of PMBC, one
Yeah.
member of planning, and one member of ZBA?
Sure, just get that.
Keep it, I
So
mean, rather
what-
small.
what if the two of us-
You did say small,
What if the two of
Paul.
us just solicited some input from folks from those boards?
That's how you want to structure it. I'm more concerned with you, 2 members of this board being involved in it, and those boards being in the loop.
Because once we
However
do
that
that,
works, that's fine.
we're
I think it's slowing
So-
down the process.
slowing down the process, we're
Right.
also on that slippery open meeting law slope.
Right, if the 2 of you run around and visit with each of a member from each of those boards and get the same sort of input, then we don't have to deal with all the appointing and scheduling meetings, and gets the same thing accomplished.
And just so that I can assist the members who are going to be doing that solicitation to the extent that you need my assistance, we're going to first look at the building commissioner job and perhaps try to make a decision or come to a recommendation on that for the board to be discussed at the next meeting. And then possibly take it a step further at the following meeting, that coming meeting, the 29th, where we discuss facilities manager. I just want to try to get as much clarification as
Yeah,
possible
well,
so we can.
all I suggested was that before I made any of those decisions, I'd like to take a look at the job description for the.
Yeah, I appreciate your concern with haste, but, to try to get that position filled, but, before September 3rd, but, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I know at one point in time, there was a vacancy in Stoneham, and there was mutual aid. I mean, other communities
for sure.
cover, so.
Yep. We do have an understanding with the next down over, and Harvard does support us, for sure.
Have been for 30 years, I think.
So, I mean,
Gabe?
although,
Gabe's retired.
Oh, well, so it started with Gabe anyway.
He's still hanging around Devon's, though.
Yes, he is. I think he's still providing mutual, if you recall.
Yeah,
I want to speak for him, I believe he would.
yeah. So, I mean, I think it affords us the opportunity to, I don't think we should slow play this, but I think that it affords us the opportunity to have a more thoughtful discussion.
All right.
So Cindy and Chuck?
Sure. Love working with Cindy.
But if you're gonna circulate, Nina, the job description, I think it'd be useful for all of us to see that.
Yes, it's in your
Yeah.
packet, yep.
Oh, that's already here?
I believe so, yeah. Only the, obviously, building commissioner piece.
Right.
That's right, we haven't crafted the finance director.
The
Yeah.
facilities, right, okay, so that.
Oh, we have,
No, it's building commissioner.
Do we have a draft facilities manager
I don't
job
think so.
description?
We
I know we've kicked it around, but haven't actually.
So that's another work product that may well come out of this process.
Yeah.
Ann is saying that we have an old one somewhere in the,
In the archives.
yeah.
that's about 12 years old, right?
And if I
Careful,
send you-
and you're gonna
I
get
send you-
invited to every selectman meeting.
And if I send you an email right now, do you think you'd be able to fire that off to Cindy now? Would you be able to get on that?
Facilities?
Is that something you think you'd be able to get your hands on or no?
Tomorrow morning, yes.
Yeah, I'm not right now. That's why I said if I send you an email in your inbox, that's okay.
Sounds like the personnel committee. We're firing things at her all the time. So we all set for that now?
Sure.
Okay, town administrator, this is a town administrator. A, auditing firm update.
I'll defer to Mr. Ansaldi. He's been working on that item with Mr. Venuti. Just want
We're
to,
just gonna solicit quotes and have something back for your next meeting on the 29th.
Have just one come back, or you gonna bring?
Quotes, so
Okay.
hopefully we get more than one, I'm sure we will.
Yeah.
And then the board can take those into consideration, choose what they want.
Is there interest out there, or do you know yet?
I don't know yet, but there'll be interest.
Yeah.
It's just a question of timing, you know, who can do it, when you want to do it.
Yeah. Okay, part B, summer internship update.
Selectwoman Napoli and I are meeting with, we received, let me take a step back. We received 2 applicants for the internship position, and Selectwoman Napoli and I are meeting with one of the candidates this week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So we'll have more information in the future. Just wanted to kind of keep it on everyone's radar.
You
that it
didn't
was-
already meet with Jill last?
We didn't have it didn't link up, so if you'd like to join us, then we can certainly build you in if you're
Depends on
available.
availability,
Yeah.
yeah, just let me know when you're gonna do it.
With Jess?
Yeah.
So, like Nina said, we received two applications. One of them came from Jessica Peterson, who's a former Littleton High School graduate. She's now enrolled in law school, so she responded to the request.
Okay, so that's a,
Date and time, yeah.
And number C, special announcement of Assistant Town Administrator acceptance of a position in the town of Wenham.
Whatever.
Congratulations.
Thank you. As you all know, yes, the town of Wenham offered me the position of town administrator for them, so I'll be starting there on August 5th. Last day in the office here, the
So
second.
you and Cheryl can actually pass each other
On
on
128.
your first days.
Yeah, on 128.
So when's your last day here?
The August 2nd.
Okay.
wow, it's coming up quick. Well, congratulations,
Thank you.
Anthony.
Thank you.
Town of Wenham will be happy with what they get.
You must be excited.
Very. Yeah, it's a great opportunity, great community. So,
Great.
A little better commute too, yeah.
yeah, I didn't mind the commute though. Catch up with my sports talk.
Last thing on the agenda is minutes approval.
So before we do the minutes approval, can we just look at Friday morning is, I think optics wise, us meeting Friday morning to discuss or make a decision on dispensaries is not gonna be well received. And didn't know if we might be able to make another time, day. So the best that we could do would be anytime Thursday. Paul can't do anytime Thursday. So the soonest we could do would be Friday morning. Friday afternoon is not a possibility.
I'm open Friday afternoon.
I'm open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
I'm open
All
Friday
fine.
after 3.
So you guys tell me when to be where.
I just think from an optics standpoint, if we do it at 7 in the morning, it just,
Oh, I agree, but how about Friday at 3? Is that what you said?
I'll be in the road by then. So
Right.
I'll be around in the morning, I'll be around.
I mean, honestly, we've had many meetings and discussions about this topic recently. We've received a lot of public input, not only here in meetings, but through email, just around town. I don't know what, I know what you're saying optically, it looks like we're kind of just trying to sneak it in, but we're trying to just finalize the process. And that's what works best with our schedule. You're going on vacation. You know, some things are out of our control, and in this respect, we can't control scheduling.
And frankly,
Totally just blame me for going on vacation.
No, not at all.
schedule-wise, I mean, I think there's a
Thursday
good
and I won't
number.
be there, but, you know, I don't
Right.
care.
There's
If
a
you wanna do that,
significant number
go
of
ahead
the
and
members
do
of
it.
our community who would view 7 AM as a hell of a lot better than 10 o'clock at night.
That's a good point.
You know, I mean,
Right.
I get what you're saying. I'll do whatever, but.
I anticipate some fallout from it.
There will be. I mean, there always is with this type of thing, but you are well within your rights to have a meeting at 7 AM. I know you know that, but you're definitely well within your rights. There's usually, whenever changing times of meetings that become especially, you know, dramatically different. I've had circumstances where we've changed meetings from 5 PM to 7 PM at the recommendation of residents in another community, and there's been, you know, applause by some and, you know, fallout by others, and the same thing goes for daytime meetings. You're well within your rights, it's just a decision of the board if it's comfortable doing that,
If you'd rather,
considering the office.
go ahead and post it for Thursday, I just can't be here.
So,
We all need to be here
if
for
I,
this
if I were able to
decision.
be back for next Tuesday, I'm just throwing something out there, I hope Marty's not watching. If I were able to get back next Tuesday, is that something that would work for folks, or?
I'd make it work.
Well, why don't we post for Friday in the event that I am able to not get divorced over next Tuesday? Is that something can we have that kind
That's
of
at the
flexibility?
23rd.
I'd rather you not have to do it, I'd rather if, you know, we just go ahead, if you feel it's that important to have it at night, have it on Thursday.
I think it's important to have you there. I mean, I think, I'm the one that advocated for us doing it
You know,
sooner than, I mean, just.
we didn't have
people
a
have
crowd,
been
we
waiting.
didn't have a crowd tonight, and people had no idea whether we were gonna vote or not on it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So how big a difference is it if we meet on Friday? I think people kind of said their piece.
Well, and think of how many letters we received. I mean, we're certainly,
Right.
the public has shown that they know how to tell us what they think on this topic in
Right.
particular.
Right.
Yeah. That's why,
I agree. I
you
mean,
know,
I don't.
I hate a Friday morning meeting, but I don't think we can really be held like, oh, you're trying to dodge the public. Heck, we had them here for, you know, meeting after meeting after meeting, and, you
Right.
know, for months.
Right.
Post for Friday.
Yeah, I think we go forward with Friday.
Friday.
I just think it's important that we're all here for the decision.
I agree.
so
It's gotta be a full.
It's gotta be yeah.
I'll just start using Shaw's and Groton.
You don't already? In the chair?
Who's bringing the coffee?
I will. Be happy to.
Just bring the Keurig down here.
Push the button. No, I'm kidding.
I guess we have minutes, right?
I didn't have any comments on the minutes.
I don't either.
Anybody else?
You didn't what?
I didn't have any comments
Oh.
on the minutes.
Yeah, they're fine, they're good.
They're fine with
Who
me.
did them this time? They look stylistically a little bit different.
Well, I know that
There were no
Well-
ellipses.
Diane definitely contributes to them on a regular basis, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of the employee who does them initially.
Sue?
Okay, I don't recall. Yeah, you're right, probably was Sue Raymond. Right, yeah.
Sue, that's right.
And then I'll move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the meeting minutes of June 24, 2019.
Second.
Motion's been made and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? I look for
Motion adjourned?
motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Motion been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Click.
Aye. Thank you very much.